Good evening. Welcome to our May 24, 2021 meeting of the Lake Bluff Village Board of Trustees. Clerk, please call the roll.
You're on mute, and I'm here.
Trustee Inkeman,
Here?
Trustee Brienne,
Here.
Trustee Fisher, Trustee Marquis,
Here.
Trustee Rappin, Trustee Ryder,
Here.
Trustee Sherlow, President Sherlow.
Present. Here. Please stand with me and join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flags of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Tonight we begin our meeting with two awards. First, we have the Government Finance Officer Association Certification of Achievement in Financial Reporting. The Government Finance Officers Association, GFOA, established the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting program in 1945 to encourage and assist state and local governments to go beyond the minimum requirements of generally accepted accounting principle to prepare comprehensive annual financial reports that evidence the spirit of transparency and full disclosure, and then to recognize individual governments that succeed in achieving that goal. The Village of Lake Bluff was awarded the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting for its fiscal year 2020 Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. This is the highest form of recognition in government accounting and financial reporting. Despite receiving this award numerous times, staff remains committed to continue working on improving the quality of financial documents and maintaining transparency. Staff is appreciative of the Village Board and Finance Committee's support and guidance in these efforts. Now, having been here 2 years, I have seen those documents and I'm continually impressed by what Bettina O'Connell and her team are doing for us every 2 weeks. And I'm very impressed with that continued commitment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, President Sharlow.
And also, I know that this is, and I did ask Drew this morning, this is the 26th time this recognition was given to us from GFOA. So congratulations to you and your finance team, Bettina.
Thank you very much.
Next, we have a village accreditation from the Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies. Since the first Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies, CALEA, accreditation award was granted in 1984, the program has become the primary method for an agency to voluntarily demonstrate their commitment to excellence in law enforcement. The standards upon which the law enforcement accreditation program is based reflect the current thinking and experience of law enforcement practitioners and researchers, major law enforcement associations, leading educational and training institutions, government agencies, as well as law enforcement executives internationally acknowledge the CALEA standards for law enforcement agencies and its accreditation programs as benchmarks for professional law enforcement agencies. As you may recall, CALEA initially accredited the Lake Bluff Department in 1999. Successful reaccreditation requires the Lake Bluff Police Department to comply with 352 standards. On December 7, 2020, a team of assessors from CALEA examined all aspects of the Lake Bluff Police Department's operations, policies, procedures, management, and support services. More specifically, areas such as evidence procedure, traffic enforcement, investigation practices, disaster plans, in-custody procedures, and personal policies were reviewed by 2 CALEA assessors through virtual meetings. The assessors reviewed written materials, conducted interviews with employees and others through the community. The assessors completed their review of the agency on December 9, 2020, and delivered their report attached in our minutes tonight to the full CALEA Commission, which awarded re-accredited status on March 27, 2021. This is Bluff 8 CALEA accreditation. I have looked at the report. This is very impressive, and that represents how much work you guys have put into that. Thank you. And also, I was told by, when I first became a trustee, that for an agency our size, it is not common to achieve such credentials, so thank you very much.
Good evening, everyone. For those who do not know, I am Matt Smazinski. I serve as a Deputy Police Chief here in Lake Bluff. To my left is Sergeant Tom Vinson. He serves as the Afternoon Supervisor. Why we're both here tonight, too, is in part I was the accreditation manager for the last few assessment cycles, and now I'm passing the torch on to Sergeant Vinson, and we're to better move on the knowledge and experience in our agency. So I'm going to turn it over to him for just a brief moment.
All right. I think the president did a good job summarizing up what CALEA is, but it was formed in 1979, the Commission for Accreditation of Law Enforcement Agencies, by the law enforcement's major executive associations, which included the International Association of Chief of Police, the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, the National Sheriff's Association, and the Police Executive Research Forum. Basically, the goal was to create the best practice standards that could be applied in New York, Illinois, California, departments the size of New York City, and departments, the size here in Lake Bluff. So that was the goal. And I know we have a little video here that should summarize kind of what CALEA does.
Today's public safety CEOs and their organizations operate in an environment filled with complex and dynamic challenges. These include budget cuts, fluctuating crime rates, legal decisions, technology considerations, and a range of other contemporary issues that can be difficult to navigate successfully. Fortunately, CALEA provides a strategy for public safety organizations to meet these challenges and demonstrate professional excellence. As the gold standard in public safety, CALEA has been recognized as the preeminent accrediting body in the field for nearly 40 years. Programming includes law enforcement, public safety communications, campus security, and public safety training academy accreditation. CALEA accreditation can assist your agency to achieve positive outcomes by providing progressive public safety support based on reviews from professionals across the private, public, and academic spectrums, as well as identifying organizational risks, service gaps, opportunities, and comprehensive mitigation strategies. Leveraging support from accreditation networks for peer-to-peer review and for the sharing of best practices. CALEA accreditation provides a management framework for both operational and administrative responsibilities that is regarded as a comprehensive model for recognizing professional excellence. It delivers reviews and analyses that agencies need to make data-driven decisions to appropriately coordinate activities and allocate resources. And it increases organizational transparency and public confidence by administering to internationally accepted standards. Collectively, these tools support line-level service providers, supervisors, and managers while promoting safer communities. Simply put, CALEA provides the solutions and support to successfully meet the contemporary challenges facing your public safety agency. To learn more about CALEA accreditation, please visit us at www.calea.org. Keep up to date by following us on Facebook and Twitter, and connect with us on LinkedIn.
Thank you so much, gentlemen, and congratulations to the entire police department. Very nicely done. Thank you.
Thank you. So what does this mean for us, though, as Lake Bluff? We have our award, and as I show you that, I'll just explain a few things. So what does this mean for Lake Bluff? It's, as CALEA would say, it's an increased community advocacy, stronger defense, against civil lawsuits, reduced risk and liability exposure, and greater accountability within the agency itself.
Basically, there's two components of CALIA. The first being policy, which dictate basically everything we do every day. And the great thing about being part of CALIA is we're also part of the IPAC, which is the Illinois Police Accreditation Coalition. It allows us to share our policies with each other. So when there is a major change, you know, in a matter of a few minutes, I can have 6 other policies from 6 other departments that are all CALIA. And we can kind of cut through them together and see what fits where. The best part of being part of CALIA is when changes happen in Illinois, chances are we've already changed our policy. Our policies are already kind of ahead of the curve because CALIA kind of looks further down the road. So it's nice we don't have to change things as often as some other towns do around here. The second part is the standards and proofs. The standards, like we're saying, the 300 plus standards, that covers everything from oath of office to drunk driving to evidence collection. And within those standards, there's also several subsets. Then to be compliant with those standards, we have to upload what we call proofs. So it could be something as simple as a traffic ticket to show that we did DUI enforcement this year. It could be a DUI report. It could be an evidence receipt showing that we collected evidence from a scene. So what they do on a yearly basis is a remote assessments. They have a CSM, which is a compliance service manager. We'll actually dial into our program that we use, Power DMS, and they'll pick 80 random standards, and they'll go through each one with a fine-tooth comb to make sure that we're keeping up to date each year over and over. So that's the once a year, and then every 4 years, DC specifically will kind of fill you in on what happens on the 4th year.
So on the 4th year, CALIA will come on site. This time it happened to be a remote assessment. And they have the opportunity to interact with the village. They can come, they can see what is Lake Bluff and how does the police department interact with Lake Bluff and the residents. And this year, unfortunately, it was a remote due to the COVID situation. But even though, I think we ended up doing, what was it, about 40-ish interviews or something like that. So it was quite extensive. I believe they were able to ascertain and get a really nice picture of Lake Bluff and us as the police department. And then after that, they create a report that everyone has had the opportunity here to review. That goes in front of the commission itself. And we're put on, they put us on the spot and they say, hey, here you are as an agency, tell us about yourself. Let's see the report. And they then make a recommendation to the full commission on accreditation or not. At this time, we were, again, reaccredited the 8th time. Out of Illinois, there's 42 agencies that are accredited. 744 across the country. So when you put that in perspective, that's very respectable to be an agency this size and be within that group. In fact, Lake Bluff, when it was accredited in 1999, there was a race between, I believe it's an Ohio department and us, for the smallest agency in the country to be accredited. And I believe, right, so it's pretty impressive. And I think even to this day, we may even be the smallest one in Illinois that's still accredited. Don't quote me on that, but I believe so. So it's very something to be proud of as an agency, as a community, and we appreciate the support of the board, of the village, to allow us to do this, because we think this is putting the best foot forward that we could possibly do. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Again, nicely done.
Thank you.
Next are the consideration of the minutes of the May 10, 2021 Village Board meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Thank you. A second?
Second.
Any changes? Thank you. Clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Brian,
Aye.
Trustee Fisher,
Aye.
Trustee Marquis,
Aye.
Trustee Ryder,
Aye.
President Charlo,
Aye.
Trustee Inkman,
Aye.
Thank
the
you.
motion passes.
Thank you very much. Next, non-agenda items and visitors. The village president and board and trustees allocate 15 minutes during this item for those individuals who would like the opportunity to address the village board of trustees on any matters not listed on this agenda. Each person addressing the village board of trustees is asked to limit their comments to a maximum of 3 minutes. Do we have anybody?
I'm checking. Bear with me one moment. We have one, yes, sir. Let me bring him over to speak. Mr. Russell, if you can unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right. Welcome, everyone. My name is George Russell. I'm a resident of the village. I live at 448 Gurney Avenue. I'm here tonight to express my very extreme displeasure as a resident with the North Shore Water Reclamation District. For those of you that may not know, the North Shore Water Reclamation District is the entity that operates the large wastewater pumping station that is situated down on Sunrise Beach, right in the middle of Sunrise Beach, that collection of buildings that is due west of the parking lot of the access road. And I'd like you just to run you through a couple of their activities over the past year. I've sent in 4 different photographs, and I'm hoping that Mr. Cole can bring them up one at a time for the board to see. Glenn, if you can, picture number 1. This is a photo that was taken last summer of the parking lot directly in front of their facilities. This torn up lot was left in this condition throughout the entire year. But what is most amazing about this is that in June, the North Shore Water Reclamation District had a patching crew down on the lot. They had all the equipment they needed to repair areas like this, but for reasons which I don't understand, they chose to only patch approximately 60% of the torn up area. They just left the lot in this condition for the entire season. And I guess I would ask each of the trustees to just ask yourself this one simple question. Would the North Shore Water Reclamation District do this and leave this condition for a parking lot down in Lake Forest or for a parking lot down in Highland Park? The answer is absolutely not. Next picture, please. This is a guardrail that the North Shore Water Reclamation District contractors removed in December when they started their revetment project. A very banged up beat old guardrail. It was obvious that it was not going to go back in. The project was completed in January. They left that guardrail laying there for 4 months, right in the middle of the Ebola native planting area. The Park District staff finally had to beg North Shore to take it out of there. North Shore Water Reclamation District employees go down to that pump station all the time. And I asked the same question: would the North Shore Water Reclamation District do this down at the Lake Forest Beach? The answer is obviously no. Well, so I asked the question, what's going on? Next picture, please. Now, this is a picture of the beach access road. And believe it or not, this picture was taken after they completed the patching of the road approximately 2 weeks ago. And this is the condition that they apparently intend to leave it in for several years to come, under the assumption that maybe their large water storage tank project may progress, or maybe the Park District might be able to raise the funds to do another revetment project. But look at the condition of this road. This is after the patching work was completed. That roadway hasn't been resurfaced in over 20 years. And I guess I'm remiss in not mentioning at the very beginning, the North Shore Water Reclamation District is responsible, completely responsible, for the maintenance of the roadway down to the pumping station. They built this roadway in 1970-71, and they enlarged the parking lot in front of their facilities at the same time. They're responsible for the maintenance of this. Over the last couple years, as it has deteriorated, Park District staff has had to go out there and throw cold mix into the potholes as they surface. And then the last quick picture, Glenn, is just a picture of a portion of the lot at the bottom where it was been just patched with the large cracks. Anyone that knows anything about asphalt, once the cracks get to this size, potholes are going to start developing. This is the major thoroughfare to the Park District's South Beach. Just makes me angry. And I guess I'm here before you tonight hoping that at least one of you will be angry. And I'm hoping that the board will formally express their displeasure with the North Shore Water Reclamation District, not through staff, but as a board, because they should be embarrassed about these particular activities. I'm not even talking about the bigger picture of the barbed wire enclosed exposed generator, or the odor that's much worse than the odor down at the Lake Forest Beach. Those issues need to be addressed, but they demonstrated they don't even care about the little things. They're guests at our beach. And I hope that someone at the board level will get energized about this, especially that area, that roadway that was left at the completion of patching. That's just ridiculous. There are guests in our community. We're supposedly represented by a gentleman by the name of Tom Swarthout, who represents both Lake Bluff and Lake Forest, but I'm not quite sure he's doing anything at all for Lake Bluff. I don't remember him ever coming to a meeting. He receives a salary for what he does and benefits. He's supposed to be representing our community, but has he ever come in and said, gee, Lake Bluff, what can we do for you? How are we doing? I don't think so. So once again, thanks for listening. I hope someone can get energized about this, and let's start putting some pressure on these guys, because it's the only way things are going to change. Thank you.
George, thank you very much. Is there anybody else?
There is not.
Okay. The village president and the village president and board of trustees. I'm sorry, George. I think you're absolutely right. It doesn't look good for the village. And I'm often at the Lake Bluff Yacht Club, and I did notice that on the road, and I was not very happy about it. So thank you for bringing this up. Next.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Hey, George, this is Joy Markey. Hey, I was just wondering if the Park District has been discussing any of these issues with the North Shore Water Reclamation District. Have you guys been in any discussions? I can't remember if you're still on the board over there, if you're still helping over there.
I'm not on the board, never was, but I'm a volunteer on one of their committees. The committee has been discussing it lately, and just a half hour before your meeting, they have their meeting tonight, and I made these same comments before their board tonight. I mean, it's my understanding that staff, Drew is down there trying to put pressure on them, and Park District staff has been talking to their staff, but doesn't seem to be getting us anywhere. And we shouldn't even have to be commenting about these type of basic operations. They should be taking care of this. So that's where it stands.
Thank you. Okay.
Drew,
Yeah.
what recourse do we have? I agree with George. This is embarrassing, and we should all be embarrassed by this. Thank you, George, for bringing this to our attention, but what is our recourse here?
So before I answer that, so some clarity. So we did, as George mentioned, the village engineer and I met down at that facility about, I want to say, Jeff, 2 weeks ago. Does that sound right? It wasn't that long ago. We met with them. They were talking about the fencing. Some other improvements have been done, like that, the guardrails that were shown have been cleaned up and removed. And the question that we were brought there to answer had to do with what happens to the eastern side of the parking lot where they did all the improvements and added the armor stone and so forth. And should there be fencing or a guardrail, what should go there for risk management and aesthetic needs? And we met with them and we said, well, you called the meeting, did you not invite the park district? And so, but I basically had a conversation with the executive director of Park District following that meeting and said, well, you need to tell me what you want, and certainly we can meet and try to meet and get this solved. But we had commented on the parking lot while we were there. We had wandered up the hill where they had markings. This is pre-pavement work. And we said, please explain to us what you're going to pave here, because there was a lot of white lines. And as pointed out, it was, it's a sea of potholes. It's a mess. And we said, tell me this is not all you're doing. They said, well, we're going to come back here. We're going to do this. And they're kind of leaving it in the contractor's hands. And then, so this was the outcome of, I guess, last week. And I think, to answer your question, I think the recourse is, I think it's helpful that people, residents like George, bring this to a public meeting and share the concern. And I think it would be very helpful if the village, I certainly can craft a letter that can be signed by everybody here, driving home the disappointment and execution and care of this area. That's probably the extent of which it is their responsibility to maintain it, but it's by whose standard? And the standard is set by them, right? It's the idea of this is an area that, to my knowledge, is under the care of that agency. So whatever risk they want to accept with that, that's up to them, from a risk management standpoint. But
May I ask
Support that. Thank you.
a question? As a constituent village, do we have the right to audit? I'd be interested to know what is spent to do that kind of work, and perhaps by comparison, what is spent elsewhere to do comparable work. Do we have that right?
Well,
Can FOIA the information.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think it's probably worth,
Clear it's in their documents, how they.
right,
Yeah.
right, but we choose to be part of this or this district? Or are we by default and it's part of this
By
district?
geography.
By geography.
Yeah.
I see. So FOIA maybe might be a start. If we could go down to the beach down at Lake Forest or Highland Park and observe that the conditions are far better, then presumably they're spending more money on that constituency. So I think it's worth asking the question. Although, I hate to put them to the FOIA requirements, but, it seems audit worthy.
Does that actually fall under our purview or the park district?
It's Park District property. It's it was a court ruling back in the 70s that the parties shall do this and you shall do this. And that's the way it was set out. So it's kind of referred to as a lease, but it was a court ruling.
But we were a party to that.
We were, yeah.
So we may have enforcement rights
Yeah.
if we were a party.
Yeah, so we could look at that. I think, I guess I'd like to hope that the North Shore Water Reclamation District would be responsive to the village collectively, and I guess I don't want to say suspect they will do so, but I'm hopeful they will. I think that's probably stage one, give them a notice and cure period, the expectation.
Yes.
Yeah,
That'd be good.
yeah.
And we don't want them to move it up on top of the bluff the way they originally planned, right? From the 70s.
That's right.
Okay. Just want to make sure that that's not the recourse.
Sunrise and Park.
Yes, right.
So,
Okay,
does that sound like
yes.
okay.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Russell.
Thank you.
I presume that the Park District had a similar response? He's gone.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I'll talk to George.
Okay, next we have our, the village president and board and the village president and board of trustees. I'm sorry, I didn't like that. I don't think it looks good on our community, and I'm a little bit distraught by that. So I really thank George for bringing that to our attention. Now I'll take that seriously. The village president and board of trustees will entertain requests from anyone present on the order of business to be conducted during the village board meeting. If there is no objection, I would like to take the consent order and item 10B now, and then return to the regular agenda order. The consent agenda consists of 5 items. The correspondence, number 11. Number 12, a resolution approving a second amendment to a professional services agreement with Passport Labs, Inc. Number 13, a resolution approving an outdoor dining facility for Rave Cycles, LLC, Bank, on 79 East Scranton Avenue. Number 14, a resolution approving the extension of a special use permit and variations for a restaurant and drinking place, Lawrence English Pub, 103-13 East Scranton Avenue. And number 15, a resolution authorizing certain village officials' signatures with Lake Forest Bank and Trust. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussions?
I had talked to Drew earlier about the layout of the tables for Bonk. They had several tables in front of where Prairie Espresso is going to expand into that storefront. And so it was just discussed that once Prairie moves in, those tables will be moved and Prairie can put their own tables in front. So that's my only comment.
Thank you. Anything else?
I had the same comment and discussion with Drew, and also the configuration of the tables, along with some signage that's often on the sidewalk, has created an impediment to pedestrians. So either the number of tables needs to be reduced, or the people that put the signs out need to be more mindful of the fact that they're putting them right in the way of people walking.
And I think that's the problem, because they don't get permission to do that, they just do it. So I
Right.
think we can solve that problem.
Any more discussions? Any more discussion? Clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Markey,
Aye.
Trustee Ryder,
Aye.
Trustee Inkman,
Aye.
Trustee Brienne,
Aye.
Trustee Fisher,
Aye.
President Sherlow.
So the village president should not be called for a vote unless it's a tie or some other
Okay.
circumstance. Thank you.
Sorry,
No problem. So
the motion passes.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you very much. Next is item 10B, consideration of approval of appointment of Stephen Rappin to fill vacancy on the village board. It is anticipated that the village president, Régis Charlot, will recommend the appointment of former member of the Lake Bluff Development and Downtown Ad hoc Committee and Architectural Board of Review, Stephen Rappin, to fulfill the remaining 24 months of his term as village trustee. Is there a motion to approve this appointment?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Any discussions?
Would Steve like to introduce himself a little bit?
Thank you, Joy, for the opportunity to introduce myself.
Can you put the microphone in front, there we go.
That much? Yeah, okay. Again, thank you, Joy, for the opportunity to introduce myself. So I am Stephen Rappin, and I have lived here in Lake Bluff for 20 years. I lived on the East Terrace, and now I live on the East Side. I lived right across the street from Christine Lechtinger, who was the village president for a long time, and of course, Kathy O'Hara would come over all the time, so I would see those ladies busy at work on behalf of the village, and that inspired in me a desire to give back to the village as well, which I did with the ABR and with the Downtown Development Committee a few years ago. Lake Bluff is a magical place. I mean, this is a really fantastic and special place to raise your family, and even to live as a child and as a senior. My hope is to be part of this board. I hope to bring some unique skill sets that are complementary to everybody else that is here. I hope to provide a future for all of the folks that are coming in future generations. I know that my kids included that want to live here in Lake Bluff, to make sure that this is a community that continues to thrive, that continues to leverage its special assets, and to be a fantastic place to live.
I had a question. It sounds like you're very qualified, and I'm sure you'll do a fine job serving. But I know that there were some concerns that were raised by at least one resident concerning this particular appointment and the choice. And I was wondering if you might address some of the concerns that were brought up in terms of this being an elected position and, a non-elected person is being put into that position.
I can, absolutely. So a concern was brought by a member of his community for selecting Stephen Rappin as worthy of his position. And so I do understand, and we have multiple conversations, the two of us, but the custom would point to having past trustees, for example, to fill that position. I've thought quite a lot on that. That is, who would be the best person on this board, the best person to fill this position on the board. And I've driven teams for a very long time. I have created teams that, before being in this position, we would always say it takes a village to create X. And so my main concern is how to create a balanced board to address issues that are going to be multiple in front of us. Now, what is important is in selecting a trustee, and that's how I approached that job myself, that is being completely fair, being completely impartial, come without a preconceived notion of what should be the answer, be open to what is in front of us. And so what we have in front of us are zoning issues, okay? And we need to be impartial to those zoning issues. And looking at the current makeup of a board, we need people that can answer as professionals, as experts, that can help us form an opinion for what could be the right answer for Lake Bluff. Of course, there's 7 of us, but we need more expertise on this board. We had 2 obvious choices with William Meyer and Aaron Toll, and I didn't feel that it was going to be the right choice. Now, one thing I should also say is this election was different. It was a contested election. We also did not have Vote Lake Bluff doing the normal stuff they do every year, or every 2 years. That is, interview candidates in a public assembly, have people answering questions in a live format, have people being vetted by the community by the caucus, I should say, by having a formal vote in the caucus to really provide a recommendation to the community that these people are truly great for the community. We didn't have that. And so I ended up, that was actually not easy. I was very tense about that. I have a lot of angst about answering that. I ended up with 2 people that were fitting that criteria, and I did interview these 2 people. And at the end of the day, I came to think that Stephen Rappin was the right choice for this board. And that's how we came here.
Thank you for addressing those concerns.
Thank you. Questions?
Public comment?
If nobody else has any comments, then I'll speak to this. My issue is that I disagree with President Charlot in the sense that we were vetted, those of us who have run, in my case, yours and Regis's, we've been vetted twice for these positions. The caucus not assembling in live does not change the fact that we all answered the questions the caucus put forward. We all participated in the League of Women Voters debate, and we were all made available, I made myself available to voters, I know you all did, to take questions. So people know what our positions are, and in the case of both Trustee Lemieux and Trustee Dewart in the past, when they were appointed, people had a chance to vet them prior to their reappointment or to their appointment to fill vacancies. In this case, I believe we're acting as fiduciaries on behalf of voters and have not had an opportunity to speak to Mr. Rappin. Unlike the voters out there that know where I stand, I have no idea what his positions are on any of the issues that might come before us. So I can't, the statutory language uses the phrase advise and consent. I can't advise on something I don't know anything about. So I'm not able to give an opinion on someone I don't know, whose positions I'm not familiar with, on substantially important topics that we're going to consider together over the tenure that he would occupy that seat.
I'd like to say something. I did have a chance to talk to Mr. Rappin, and for the same reason, I wanted to understand where he was coming up from, what he would bring to the board, what his experience is, and how he views the role and the responsibility of a potential appointment. Before I say more about my impressions of Mr. Rappin, I'll say that I'm looking at the process and what I see in both the statutory language and in what has become commonplace here is that for good or for bad, the way the rules are written, the president has the power to appoint. Otherwise, we would be looking at who came in fourth place. That could have been built into the statute, and perhaps at some point these rules will be revisited. But the public did elect. They elected us to be their voice and their representation. And so it does fall on our shoulders to make a difficult decision, but a decision on behalf of what we believe to be the best interest of this board and the community. That being said, and this has been said many times, we have an embarrassment of riches when it comes to the folks who have stepped forward and expressed interest in this volunteer work. Though I don't think we could go wrong with any of the potential appointees, I do place very high on my list of importance is a divorce, too much time in divorce court today. A diverse board. It's important that we're not an echo chamber, that we're not repeating and laying over one another's skill sets. And right now I see a powerhouse of people up here, all with very unique skill sets. And I think we do have a missing gap that Steve can fill. So I personally found my time speaking with you to be encouraging. I think you and I disagree in some places, and then we're in lockstep in some places, and I look forward to that discourse. I look forward to you challenging me if you are appointed, and vice versa.
I'd just like to add, I've known Steve for quite a while, and I feel like his work on the Ravinia board is something that should be highlighted. I think that he brings a lot of business acumen. I think that he will be a good voice for us. I also don't know his positions on a lot of things. We hadn't had a chance to sit down and chat about that specifically, but there's no question in my mind that his heart is in Lake Bluff. He's raised his family here. He's lived here for a long time, and I think he would be a good addition to the board.
I'll speak to this as well. And while serving on the school board, we had several opportunities to do something like this, to appoint, and the process was different. The process was different, and I think what we need to pay attention to here is the process that's set out by state law for us, and the qualifications are enumerated in state law. I believe Mr. Rappin is lived here for more than a year, considerably more than a year. He's let me see if I get them all.
He meets all the qualifications.
Pardon me?
He does
meet all the qualifications.
Yes.
He's not a felon, and and is up to date on his water bill as far as I know. I think having set forth that process, that it is the president who puts forth the proposal, and for us to advise and consent, we should follow that process rather than one that we may or may not, in our experience, have been able to follow in the past.
Thank you. Any more item of discussions?
Peter, I have a question for you.
Sure.
Where does that leave us if Susan is going black letter? Where does that leave someone with my position?
To vote.
Correct.
Right.
No, I mean, there is no, sometimes in the past, when I've heard you as someone sitting in the audience versus sitting on the dais, give advice as to whether or not you have room to vote your conscience versus you're sort of hemmed in to vote a certain way.
No, you're free to vote your conscience. I mean, it is, the statute doesn't provide any standard for why to approve an appointment and why not to approve an appointment. Obviously, you can't approve an appointment for somebody who doesn't qualify and meet the qualifications on the statute, but short of that, there are no standards for who the village president should appoint, and there are no standards for whether or not the board should approve that appointment. So it is within your legislative discretion to decide, each of you, to decide whether or not to approve the appointment. There's, you know, we can look up and down a lot of different levels of government, but that goes right up to the United States Senate and down. These approval of the appointments are up and down votes, and there's not really, at least for this particular one, not really a process or any more standards than just the general qualifications.
Right. Got it.
Peter, could Kate abstain? Is that an option for Kate?
It's always an option. The concern with abstain, as I think we talked about in our orientation, is that an abstention will be counted one way or another.
And
So-
it's tacit approval, in other words. Thank you.
Any more discussion on this item?
Mr. President, there doesn't seem to be anybody raising their hands from the public either, just for your information.
Thank you very much. So, clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Ryder,
Aye.
Trustee Inkeman,
Aye.
Trustee Brian,
No.
Suspenseful.
Of course. Clerk Hatch, you
Sorry.
you froze up after Trustee Brian's vote was cast.
right. Trustee Fisher,
Aye.
Trustee Markey,
Aye.
4-1, that vote was approved.
Thank you very much. Let's resume our agenda.
Well, I can swear in.
Yes,
The new
you can
member.
swear him in.
So I've learned the easiest way to do this is, so you can help read, because it's kind of language here. So I'm going to say this oath, and you can fill in the blanks.
Okay.
So I state your name.
I, Stephen
Oh, sorry,
Rappin.
you raise your right hand.
I, Stephen Rappin,
Having been appointed to the office of village trustee
having been appointed to the office of village trustee
in the Village of Lake Bluff,
in the Village of Lake Bluff,
in the County of Lake aforesaid,
in the County of Lake aforesaid,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of the office of Village Trustee
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of the office of trustee
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my ability.
Congratulations.
Good. Thank you.
Yep. Can I get you to sign here real quick?
Yep.
And then you can take your position right here between trustees Markey and Ryder.
Terrific.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Turn the name around.
Turn the name around.
Didn't know.
Yeah, you didn't know. There we go.
This is a nice one. Thank you. We are resuming our agenda. Our next agenda is our village finance report. Bettina, could you please proceed?
We have the warrant first, actually.
Oh, sorry.
7A.
7, I missed that. Expenditure of village fund for payment of invoices are in the amount of $364,120.37 for May 11 to May 24, 2021. Our total expenditures therefore are $364,120.37. Attached are the warrant report, and again, from May 11 to May 24 for $364,120.37. The invoice register report shows checks with a status of open or paid. All checks with a status of open are computer-generated checks for the board final approval. Checks with a status of paid are manual checks processed. So, is there a motion to approve a warrant?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Any questions? Hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Do you want me to do roll call?
Yes, please.
Trustee Brian,
Aye.
Trustee Fisher,
Aye.
Trustee Markey,
Aye.
Trustee Rappin,
Aye.
Trustee Ryder,
Aye.
Trustee Inkman.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Motion carries. Thank you very much. Next is our
There we go.
April finance report. Finance Director Bettina O'Connell, would you please provide the highlights?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Included in the packet was the April 2021 financial report. Some noteworthy items found in this monthly report include monthly sales tax revenue on a cash basis for fiscal year 21 through April is $3,377,799, which is $8,415 or 0.02% less than the FY20 cash receipts. Building permit revenue for fiscal year 21 to date is $359,687 or $9,433 less than the same reporting period for last fiscal year. And general fund total revenues of $10,507,032, less the CARES Act grant revenue of $257,269 or $27,257 or 0.3% less than the fiscal year 20 May through April revenues. Fiscal year 21 current expenditures are consistent with or less than budgeted, and the May through April expenditures of $9,506,850 are $103,462 less than the expenditures for the same period in FY20. And also as a point of reference, the American Rescue Plan, known as ARP Act, 2021 includes financial assistance for all municipalities nationwide. The Village of Lake Bluff, as a non-metropolitan municipality, will receive the first half of the population-based allocation directly from the state in the upcoming months, and the balance of the distribution about 12 months later, for a total of approximately $687,187. And the eligible uses were included in a slide in the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a motion to accept the finance report?
So moved.
Second?
Second, thank you. Any questions?
Bettina, I had a quick question. Have you all been talking a little bit about how we might utilize the $687,000 that we're going to get from the American Rescue Plan? I saw the 4 different options on this slide, and I just didn't know if you and the rest of the administration have been talking a little bit about how best to disperse those funds.
So we've had some conversations, and I think the best for the village would be option D, and that would be investments in water, sewer, or infrastructure, as that's where our needs currently are, and some of the other options we wouldn't really be able to meet the dollar value with.
Great, great. And is that something you guys will bring to us in the next couple of months, some ideas and how we might plug that into our current budget and how we might use that?
It should be part of a future finance committee meeting.
Yep.
Thanks.
Sure.
Thank you. Any more questions?
I guess the only thing I wanted to ask also is, does the American Rescue Plan have a time frame such that we need to utilize it within a certain amount of time, or we lose it or have to repay it?
I believe it's 2 years from the last installment, and there is a repayment qualifier if the funds are not expended appropriately. So if you can't show that you've used it in one of the eligible categories, there could be a chance of returning.
Yeah, this is almost like a grant, essentially,
Right,
right? There'll be
but you know,
processing, yep.
some of these big infrastructure projects can take such a long time to kind of get going. You know, there's phase 1 and phase 2 and phase 3, and so I didn't know if that, given that we're going to be kind of looking at some of those larger infrastructure projects, do you foresee that we're going to have any trouble meeting some of that? Okay.
No, there's so much water main to be replaced. I mean, that's easily, permitted for the IPA and bid. I mean, that's one of the reasons why we've talked about that internally. It's just there's abundance of work to be done, and procedurally, it's not waiting on an IDOT permit,
Right.
So it's,
Right.
yeah,
Thank you.
all good questions, yep.
Any more questions? Hearing none, clerk, please call the roll. You're muted.
I was frozen, sorry. Trustee Fisher,
Aye.
Trustee Markey,
Aye.
Trustee Rappin,
Aye.
Trustee Ryder,
Aye.
Trustee Inkman,
Aye.
Trustee Brand.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you very much. Next is our village administrator's report. The village 2021 road improvement program contemplated resurfacing East Scranton Avenue between Walnut Avenue and Oak Avenue, as well as replacing the majority of curbs in the same area, estimated at $250,000. While preparing plans for this downtown improvement, village engineering discovered an opportunity to add up to 9 parking stalls to the village parking inventory along East Scranton Avenue between Walnut and Oak Avenue, and perhaps cure previously identified streetscapes maladies, trip hazards, stormwater pooling, poor geometry. And the engineer's concept would require the block of East Scranton to become one-way, eastbound movement only, which was discussed by the village board at their February 8th, 2021 Committee of the Whole meeting, where the consensus of the board was, 1, to consider all public parking opportunities in the central business district, and 2, have the ABR consider and opine regarding the possible investment and improvements to the CBD, including decorative lighting and other streetscapes treatments. The ABR began their review in March, where they reviewed the 2007 CBD streetscape plan, all public parking opportunities, and other CBD planning documents. To assist with the design of these improvements and support the ABR discussions, the village engaged architect and landscape architect Johnny Marino from Tesca Associates. And Mrs. Marino met with the ABR at their April 6 meeting, where, following significant discussions, the ABR strongly supported the Concept 1 plan. So concept involves two-way traffic, reduces public parking by 5 stalls, and add trees. The consensus of the ABR was that the various opportunities to add public parking within the CBD created more negative outcomes, such as significant tree removals, added traffic to adjacent residential area, than the potential value of the additional parking, and was not as desirable as expanding and improving the pedestrian experience. Estimates of the April 2021 plan indicate additional funding will be required in the range of $285,000 to $420,000, depending on the extent of which aspect of the plan are included. Staff and TESCA have prepared a version of the April 2021 plan and a base option as the May 2021 plan, which is included as attachment 4. There are various ways to fund these streetscape improvements as conceived, which staff is prepared to present when the board has defined the scope of the project.
Yeah. So, yeah, thank you for that. And Jeff, do you want to go ahead and share your screen and bring up the May 2021 plan?
Yeah, just a moment.
So for you new board members, this is slightly atypical to do this process and the timing of this, but this is one of the things that was started after the board's fiscal plan was already long adopted. It was in the process of being adopted. There was a lot of support from the previous board about these projects and these possible amenities in the streetscape, and wanted to pursue that once those were shared as an opportunity to be completed with this work. I mean, the village is going to be doing this work in the fall, and so there's going to be an interruption in this block, and so the idea of ripping off the Band-Aid, if you will, let's try to do a lot of these improvements and cure some of these problems that we know about, and possibly improve the area, and continue to invest in the central business district. Jeff, can you bring up?
Yeah, it's coming. I'm sorry, just a little bit slow.
So I think the goal of tonight, from our perspective, is we're trying to create a document or a list of improvements that the board is interested in pursuing for a bid package that would be awarded and then constructed in the fall. And timing is of the essence, and working with the direction of the ABR, the drawing that we're showing you here on the screen is what we're calling the base option. And there's some slight, I guess, modifications, but I think, Jeff, would you kind of walk your way clockwise, starting in front of twigs and so forth, with the improvements that we're talking about that's included in the base option, and then our—
Yes.
1 second. And so
so this area on Center Avenue, right now there's some drainage issues, and there's another. Can you hear me, Drew?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm having some microphone issues. There's some drainage issues here, and there is, under these trees that are mature, it's basically just bare dirt from all the foot traffic and outdoor dining. So we had talked with Tesca about, what can we do here to improve this block. We've had some complaints from the merchants about the drainage and the mud. So basically the solution was to add some more sidewalk around these two existing trees, and then make more room for everything out there. There's some of these areas we're just not going to get grass to grow because of the tree cover and the foot traffic. So just adding more sidewalk, giving more pedestrian space, less mud was kind of the thought there. And then as we come up to this corner in front of Innovasi's door, right now, if I it'll let me come up here. When you cross the crosswalk, it dumps you right into this planter with the dancer sculpture into it. So that's always been a plan to revise this corner to make that pedestrian crosswalk work and move that, kind of basically reverse it. Right now where we have landscaping in this area, that would be hardscape sidewalk, and then we will move the landscaping to the outside of the circle here. They're talking about, these are seat walls, which are brick short walls with a cap on them for they act as a bench. And then the festoon lighting is these 6 poles with overhead lights strung. This was their concept, to have the 2 essential hexagons and then the crosses between those lights to make the lighting experience better. This curb line right here is about the same as what's there now. So we weren't going to expand this, but we were going to expand this corner here, make more space for bike racks, potentially a bench here, and people walking. So that area was to get expanded. And then as we head east, talking about putting a new tree in right here. Some of these sidewalks will be replaced, certainly because they're cracked or uneven. It's a question if we can do all of the sidewalks or not. There's new garbage cans, recycle bins shown on here, which the village would purchase separately and put out. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to put that into a concrete contractor's contract. We will be able to take care of that separately. More bike racks, and then we get to this part, which we call the mid-block crossing. Right now, if I go back to the existing, we have this, partial striped off area and a curb depression with the warning plate here. And if you wanted to cross the street here, 1, you'd be dumped out into traffic with no crosswalk, and 2, there's usually a parked car right here and a driveway right here. So it's not the best setup right now. And the concept was to, oops, I apologize, this is moving very slowly on me. To essentially make this more pedestrian friendly as well, by bringing this curb line out and this curb line out to make it a narrower crosswalk, a defined crosswalk where everybody knows this is the spot where you're at least supposed to cross the street. This tree would stay. They get a bench here. There's a little bit of green space, some more benches, and then that overhead lighting again is shown here. And then as we go to the eastern corner, essentially increasing this island for more pedestrian space, potentially some tables for the restaurants, more lighting. This also bumps out and makes this crosswalk narrower. The net change in parking with this plan right here is a -5 stalls compared to existing. And I think that is my summary.
Thanks. So obviously the board will probably have questions, Jeff. Some of the questions I heard earlier today was the idea of the mid-block crossing. Was there an engineering standard that would dictate that should be included? And would you answer that question? Then also, if it's not included, what does that mean for the impact on parking?
Yeah, I don't believe there's any standard that says you should have a crossing in a block this size, mid-block. I mean, if we're going to have a crossing, I like to at least define what it is and paint it across the street, unlike what's there today. If you didn't want to do this and we just left the curb lines the way they were, which is essentially straight side to side, then it would bring back probably 4 parking stalls. And if you didn't do the curb and gutter, the extra sidewalk, and these festoon lighting poles, it would probably cut about $70,000 off the project.
Okay, and just for the board's information, I don't know if you had a chance to look at the ABR's video about this, but they talked about this, and I think at the end of the day, they viewed that as another, that's not good, an added public space, and I don't know if our whole signal dropped.
Recording in progress.
Seems like it.
Recording stopped.
Let me check something. Let's hit pause.
Okay. I'm still on.
Recording in progress.
Susan, do you see the boardroom?
I have the presentation still up. And Kat is still up.
I've been disable Cortana on this.
So we lost signal.
I don't use it. It's constantly on.
Jeff, can you hear me?
Oh, there we go.
Are we back?
Jeff?
Yes, there you are.
Okay, great.
Fantastic.
For the record, that poor connectivity is coming from Wisconsin, where Jeff is, not in Illinois. So, Jeff, if you can, hold on a second. What the point I was getting ready to make was that the Architectural Board Review talked about the idea of having the crossing there, and it really did two things in their eyes. One is that it improved the pedestrian's experience, and not only in safety for actually having another place for people to cross the street. I mean, I think they talked about people just randomly walk across the street anyway. That's how people live in Lake Bluff. But the idea of giving them a designated place to go would be helpful and more safe in their eyes. And secondly, creating the spaces on the north and south side of the street for additional public gathering and use of the tenants and merchants and so forth. And the idea, even like today, the building across the street is for sale, and the idea of like what could happen on the north side of the street. And I think there's a lot of, I mean, the possibilities are endless, and to have another space for them to expand into, they like that idea. And there was a lot of discussion about it's difficult to separate the current tenants from future tenants, and I think that was something that the village learned with what happened on Block 1. The idea nobody imagined when that building was approved that there would be a brewery coming in there and that there would be that much excitement and energy and activity coming from that space. And so I think the idea is, I think the lessons learned, at least from the ABR's eyes, is, and they're the one who created that streetscape that the developer was forced to build. And now they've backtracked on that and said, listen, we know that we need to maximize the floor area of the public way, you know, to create that blank canvas or dance floor, if you will, right? So that, I think that's a lot of the ideas and thoughts behind this plan that you see here. And I think there was concern on their part, you know, trying to be cost conscious, knowing that whatever would go in here would likely be asked by other, and this actually happened in their meeting, by some of the other tenants and building owners on Block 1 and other blocks saying, this is fantastic. When will it happen for us? And so the idea is, you know, you don't want to get over your skis and promising too much, you know, brick pavers here and all types of dazzling streetscape furniture that you know that the village just doesn't have the budget for. And so the idea is just trying to stay reasonable within that, but also give some splash with the festoon lighting and the limited the masonry bench seatings with the stone cap, which is carrying on an element that's elsewhere in the CBD, specifically right outside Village Hall and some other areas on the Village Green. So, I mean, that was their idea. I mean, there was a lot of other street furniture that was in the original plan with large pots and other benches and other things that I think a lot of the ABR members talked about is, you know, not trying to shove 50 pounds in a 25-pound bag. So, and that's kind of the high overview. Again, I think our goal tonight is if we can say, if there's things that you see here that you don't want to pursue, let us know so that we can take that out of the bid specs. If there's things that we can bid as a bid alternate, if you'd like to see how the numbers come back. Jeff, might you talk about, please, the sidewalk a little more? You kind of talked about that. I just want to make sure you be crystal clear, if you can, about the extent to which the ABR was hopeful about the concrete work.
Yeah, so the numbers in the budget analysis that we distributed, that I think the current option total was about $611,000. That includes replacing sidewalk that needs to be replaced because it's cracked or uneven or, you know, other reasons, or it needs to make room for an improvement. That is not taking out all the sidewalk on the block. There was some ABR discussion about wanting it all to look new and not have the patchwork. We had that discussion that inevitably, the gas main's going to break or a water leak or something, and there's going to be somebody digging in that sidewalk within 2 years, most likely anyway. But like I said, it was probably about $40,000 away from replacing all the sidewalk in the numbers that are you're looking at. So if that's something that we want to pursue, we have to add to this number.
That's kind of the background, and so, of course, Jeff or I are happy to answer questions.
I just had a thought. I don't know why I didn't think of this earlier, but, there is kind of that unknown of what might be on the north side of the street. And when you look at the plan, it's obviously, you've got the festoon lighting on 3 spots all on the south side. If that pedestrian area were moved somehow to the north and we were able to regain some of those spots, it would be the parking and the area for people to gather. It would be a different shape, but it would also still be that safety and crossing, a place to go, and it would also have that destination, the place for somebody to sit, a little green area, and might we be able to gain a little bit of those parking spots that we're losing? It's just an idea, but if we could get the same amenities and get a parking spot or 2 out of that, that might be worthwhile.
So are you suggesting, just so I'm understanding, the southern kind of bump out?
Right.
Oh, here we go.
The amenities would all go there, so it'd be slightly different shape, but then you'd have a little bit more parking, we'd still have the crosswalk, so we can, and then it would be more equitable in terms of it looking a little bit more balanced. The north side has some interest and some specialness.
Including the festoon lighting?
Right, it would be just kind of taking festoon lighting, green space, and putting it up there in a different shape, and then you have a little bit more, maybe we could gain a spot or 2 with the
Yeah.
parking. Because the other thing that I was thinking is, looking a little bit further down the road, we've got, things like bike racks. I mean, that's not very expensive, and it's great. But I don't know what we see as current utilization of existing bike spaces and also electric vehicles. We're hearing so much about electric vehicles.
Yeah.
Has that even been mentioned? I'm not saying we need to add every bell and whistle. Obviously, we're very concerned about cost, but I mean, just has that entered the conversation?
So at a staff level, yes, we've talked about that, and talking with firms that install those types of devices, charging stations, they tell you, they would want you to put them in the high park zones, and with that, though, it comes with the aesthetic, or, it's not attractive to look at those. And so we've talked about where to put those, and we said probably like in front of
train
Village
station.
Hall, right out here.
Or the train station?
Train station as well for extended times,
Yeah.
but not in locations like this.
Yeah.
But if you, I didn't point this out, or Jeff, but there are bike racks shown just to the
Yeah.
west side of that.
Right, like right here.
Yes, excellent. Yeah. So here, I guess to your modification, I think part of the issue with that is that the 2 alley points, do you see those on the
Yeah,
north side?
yeah.
I think that would have a limiting impact on how, and also that existing tree that's there. So the idea of doing work that may disturb, and I guess that's another point that we didn't make clear, is that we did our best not to disturb existing trees. And so we didn't want to get in those root zones, and by doing that work on that side, I'm worried that would do that. And so we've tried to stay away from that, and that came from an early comment from the ABR too, with like switching to one way, right? We'd have to shift the whole sidewalk a couple
Right.
feet on the north, and that was the big friction point for them, is like, we don't want to take out the trees.
Right.
So, Jeff, is there any other thoughts on, I don't know if you understood Trustee Ankerman's design modification to the mid-block crossing? Is that physically, I mean, how possible is that?
I mean, she was talking about adding lighting to the north side, correct?
But
No.
also the green, how it's kind of the symmetrical, you have the grass or landscaping opportunities on the east and west of the walk, and there's benches on both sides. the idea was, I think she was trying to create balance with the north side of the street and kind of put some other improvements up there and
It
kind
was,
of,
I mean, my thought was, don't increase expense, relocate. So
Yeah.
you've got two on the
Yeah.
south, one in the north, in the middle. I'm not trying to add expense, I'm trying to add
Yeah.
utility by accomplishing the goals and maybe increasing a parking spot or two.
yeah. and
We're limited a little bit by, so on the south side, we're using the angled parking stalls, so that curb can come out 18 feet, I think, or 16 feet. On the north side, those are parallel stalls.
Right.
So to stay out of the driving lane, we can come out 8 feet. And that's one limiting factor in, trying to mirror that to the other side. The other is the tree that we talked about. And I'm trying to line it up, as far as the width between the two alleys. And I can't quite figure out what that width is and if, what that would impact would be. But you could certainly make that more green. And I guess if you lost the tree, that would be probably the only real way to do that.
Yeah, making it more green by getting rid of the tree just seems a
Like
little.
putting,
Counterintuitive, doesn't it?
because it's just a tree trunk with mulch on the ground around it right now. But
Yeah.
the grass that would have to come out.
Okay, well, thank you for entertaining.
We had talked about putting trees in tree grates, but that would require cutting it down and replacing it with a very small tree, because the tree grate would have to sit above the root ball of the tree.
Thank you for listening to
And that's
that
why you don't see tree
rabbit
grates.
trail. Yeah.
Tree grates.
Yeah.
Is that a bench on the north side under the tree? I just want to make sure I'm
Yes.
with, yeah, okay. Can, Drew or Jeff, could either of you just to clarify for me, this is still two-way on Scranton, correct? We're not?
Yes.
Okay, just making sure. And that bump out doesn't impede or, the traffic at all in that sense?
It is designed to be traffic calming by making it narrower. That has been shown to lower speeds.
Yeah.
Right now, if you drive down this block in the morning when there's nobody parked there, people do get a little extra speed. But that's kind of part of it too, is to reduce speeds.
I have a question about no, go ahead. The north side that are marked alleys. The building between the two alleys is what's for sale, is that what you were saying? Are the alleys,
Private.
they're private? Okay, and so if someone were to build there, they could use that alley space as building space, or must they remain alleys?
They could be redeveloped and, filled with buildings. Yeah,
I see.
That's a possibility.
So
yeah.
this configuration on the north side is dependent on the building and as it currently exists,
That's right.
rather than, yeah. Okay, rather than what it must be.
Yeah. And, if it was, assuming, let's say where it says alley and those were, continuous buildings, like a building line like it is on the south side of the street, that you could, the only thing that would change, I think, you would just extend the curb right there and add sidewalk in front of them. If that was ever to be developed to that level.
Is the two alleys part of the property that's there in the middle, or are they?
Yes, that's my understanding, yep. And there's
Okay.
parking, painted parking that hugs the inside around the building, so one travel lane with parking along there, and there's parking in the rear.
I see.
Jeff, do you want to cut to that? Can you bring up the Google satellite image?
My connection is very poor. I can try, but
It's dicey.
And another comment while I was doing this, one of the early feedback,
I see.
consensus from the ABR had to do with, should there be lighting on both sides? Should there be lighting, originally thought would be, hung, that would be strewn across the street and, swag across the street. And part of the issue is that the buildings on the north and south side don't have the same scale, right? There's different levels, and that makes it difficult. And even because they are architects, the idea that the quality of architecture is not consistent. And so the idea of calling attention to that, is tantamount to me wearing a tie, right? So it's, you don't want to call unnecessarily attention to those things. So, but not unattractive things, I should say. So there's the visual, yeah, so there's trees there that I think those are probably volunteers, but yeah, that's how it functions there. And those are the parking stalls on the, you can see them marked there.
That's private, right? That's private
Yep, it's all
parking.
private, yep. Yeah, in a perfect platted world, there'd be an alley in the back, right? That you could service the properties on, and you wouldn't have to have this, but that's, such as Lake Bluff Central Business District plan. Imperfect, perfectly imperfect. So, all right, thanks, Jeff, for that.
So I just had I had a couple comments. I love the idea of it being very pedestrian. I think that kind of, I think Lake Bluff is very pedestrian in general, and it pains me to see us lose several parking spots, but I kind of feel like we could address that in different ways with wayfaring signs and instructing other people, like where to park in other areas of Lake Bluff. So I think that is something that if we put our minds to it, we can improve that, that process of helping people from mostly out of town find parking. Because I think most people in town that actually do drive up into town know they can park on side streets and they know where they can park. And I would say the majority of people that do head into town, if they're going up there to have lunch or what have you, a lot of them walk or ride their bikes. The one thing I noticed was that it looks like there's no bike racks on the east side of the block at all anymore now. So there's usually a lot of bike racks down on the, what would that be, the southeast corner down over there by Bluffington's. And I know those bike racks are utilized quite a bit. So I would like to see some sort of bike racks in that area if we could. Kind of down by that expanded corner, because I think that's an area where a lot of people use the bike racks.
And that can be easily, I mean, that's where they are now, right?
Right.
Yep.
Right.
And that can be done with ease.
And I guess for the most part, I like the idea of, I like the idea of the bump out and the pedestrian crosswalk in the middle, and I think it will slow traffic on that street for sure. But just in general, I do see people, and I'm sure we've all seen it, people darting across the street all the time, and I think this might help give people an idea of like, this is where I should cross, and it's a little safer, especially kids on bikes and young people, because they always like to follow the rules. In general, I think it's a great idea. It's a great concept, and I love the lighting. I guess I would think maybe on the other side of the street, if we wanted to add some more lighting, maybe it doesn't have to be quite so permanent as what we're doing on the south side of the street. So on the north side, if we wanted to allow businesses to do some lighting like we've allowed Innovasi to do in the past, or we've allowed Mavry, I think we've seen a little bit of that on Block 1, maybe by B Market, where it's not quite as permanent, but at least they could have a little lighting, and that would be something that we could just approve on an as-is basis to make sure that it kind of flows with the rest of the block in the event that we get some restaurants on that side of the street.
And if I may tag on to that comment, so that was something the ABR talked about also. I mean, their goal is to complete this streetscape plan for the entire central business district. And I mean, their idea is just because there's no festoon lighting on the north side of the street at the moment in this plan, I think their early thoughts were this is gonna, flip-flop down the street. So like on Block 1, they'll have it on that side of the street, and then you come across the street by the train station, kind of, that's how they envision this working. And so what that looks like on Block 1, to be determined, but that's what their general idea was, and they knew also even moving down Block 3, maybe someday there would be something there on that corner, or even down Oak as you move south. This idea that this could, within the CBD, there's going to be all these connections that these amenities can be placed in other areas, and so visually it all connects. There's all that connective tissue. So that's the one rub, is that, they want to, and I think their goal is to get the authorization from the village board to continue this planning, because again, the Block 1 folks are crying, we want ours too, and then the connectivity with the train station, which all makes sense, right? So.
I've got a couple of comments. First, I love it. I think it really kind of creates a core downtown district visually, and I think slowing things down and making it more pedestrian. The ABR knows what they're doing, love those guys. I'm really glad you said that about Block 1, because I was going to ask if these resources were competing with Block 1, right? Because if you're over at Block 1, they've created this vibe really due to COVID, where they had to create the tent, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And you could see something a little bit more permanent than what's going on with the big concrete barriers.
Right.
Which isn't that attractive. So I was kind of wondering, are we investing in this and not Block 1? But what you said is the vision is to make this all happen.
Yeah, and right now, back in, I think it was March or late February, but the village board approved the outdoor use of East Scranton for businesses, for restaurants, and have, that concrete Jersey barriers were there for safety reasons, obviously.
Yeah, right.
They're not the most attractive. We're working with the garden club to try to pretty those up, by the way, with some landscaping. But long-term, I think the idea is that area will get, those public parking stalls on the south side of that block will get returned back into the inventory. And so that'll be all opened back up. And then I think by that point, I think you'll certainly hear the battle cry from the merchants on Block 1, you know, where's our plan, where's our amenities? I mean, I think that's coming. Yeah.
Drew, is there anything we should be considering here with budget? I mean, should we be trying to slice, or the money is here for this project? And
So that's a great question, and I think what the original plan, I mean, like all good things, there's scope creep, right? So this kind of evolved into, and I think the festoon lighting honestly came back in a lot higher than the original ideas that we were hearing from engineers, and you know, so I think right now, I can certainly say with a straight face and working with Bettina, we've come up with some alternatives where you can pull this money from. And I think the answer is yes. Everything you see here, you could fund. There's a way to do that now. And again, this was something that didn't make it into the capital plan because of the timing of the conversation and not having a fully developed planning phase 1 work done, and now it's here. The next phase of that, in terms of Block 1, what that looks like, the way this is set up, it can certainly be done incrementally, you know, and phased in over time.
Right.
And for the truth of the matter is, I mean, the village came up with a very extensive, elaborate, expensive streetscape plan back in '07 that there was, I mean, I don't know how the village would have funded it. I mean, but for not developers coming in, the village making that a demand on them, you shall, as part of your development, build out the public improvements to this degree, which happened to the Block 1 developer. And for better or worse, they did it, and we've learned that maybe we should have done something different. So, you know, that's how we've got to this point, but that's, you know, if, you know, the north block of Scranton Avenue across the street from the buildings here get redeveloped someday, or Block 3, I think the goal would be to have private developers spend those money. I think it's gonna be hard to do that with Block 1, honestly, but, and the train station, you know, that's gonna be, maybe there's some grant funds available for something, given that's a public transit station, you know, there may be some opportunities for that, but I would imagine in the long run, the village will be looking to try to find ways to fund Block 1 and others for the other areas. So, but for this window, for this specific segment, the village can do this. For the other, I think there will be ways to do the other in Block 1, probably incrementally, but I think it'll be there. And then, you know, Block 3 and parts south of here, I think that would be, you know, hopefully private developers come in and do that.
yeah. I have one last comment, and that is on the lighting. It seems that the lighting is put in place in three particular places, and they're really geared, as opposed to trying to give an aesthetic to the town, it's geared towards places where people gather. And clearly you've got Prairie there, and there's a great vibe there, and there's always a lot of people, and that's going to really enhance it. Over by Innovasi, again, that's a place where people gather. So just pointing out that as opposed to going for a broader aesthetic, and that creates, you know, lighting that is very specific to the current uses, which you alluded to at the beginning.
Yeah.
And assuming those businesses are there and they continue to be restaurants and gathering places, then great. If not, I guess we'll worry about it later, but that would be a risk I would be willing to take. My comment would be the one over by Bluffington's is the one that seems most random to me, because that east side is not what I typically think of as a gathering place, nor is it a place where there's particularly seating. So it seems a little odd to me. I just thought I'd point that out, and those are my comments.
Yeah.
Drew, I'd pick up on what Trustee Rappin just said. Bluffington's closes at 3:30. And I walk this every day. I don't see a need, if we're talking about taking haircuts, which I think will always be my position, that we should, we can fund it, but we're always talking about other people's money. So I think being conservative here, we could eliminate those. And Joy's right about, or Trustee Marquis right about the bike racks. That bike rack there is full because Bluffington's is a destination for cyclists. So we have become a destination for cyclists, which was why I was always against a one-way street here, because it would become a danger to them. Counterintuitive, but true. So I would be in favor of eliminating the lighting at the corner, and I am a less is more person. The lighting strikes me as overkill in the number. The bid is stunningly high at $252,000. So I was looking for a way to reduce that, because I think we should always look at ways to reduce that. I also, while I understand everybody's support of the mid-block crossing, this is a really short block, I disagree that we can afford to give up any parking at all. We don't have a lot of municipal parking. We don't have enough on-street parking. If we're looking to grow the central business district and make it more of a destination, it's counterintuitive to incorporate permanent changes that would reduce the number of parking. We may want to be pedestrian friendly and cycle friendly, and I'm all for that. But we live in an auto-centric world, whether we like it or not. And if we're bringing in people from farther away, they're not riding their bikes, especially in the winter, they're driving. So I was talking to some people the other day, Saturday night, oh, people from Deerfield are here. Well, they drove at night, and so they need places to park. So I think while this is attractive, getting rid of even 5 spots seems like we're cutting off our nose to spite our own face. And then just as a point, I wanted to ask Jeff if there were any concerns on Center with compaction when the sidewalk is installed for these existing trees, because they have never experienced that. So when you put down that hardscape, you tamp, and so compaction and vibration on the root systems can be detrimental, and you could see die-off of those trees within 3 years. So that's just a point of reference on that from a landscaping perspective. But I'd love to see if there was a possibility of reducing the number of light poles, because I think visually the weight of them, while I understand the ABR's taken that into consideration, I like the idea of lighting up the corner of Innovasi and getting rid of that planting bed. But I'm just curious if there's a way to make it, instead of hexagonal, make it like a fan, so that they're stringing them out, but there are fewer poles because they're a visual impediment. So there's going to be a lot happening there, and it's very busy visually and very heavy. So we can talk about redevelopment on the north side of the street, but it's not on our, there is nothing in the foreseeable future. So we're weighting the one side of the street with a lot, and it just seems like it will become very, very busy. And I understand we're trying to make it more inviting, but based on Saturday night's crowd, it doesn't seem like we need to do a whole lot to do that.
Need to be less welcoming, you think?
And that was just my husband and I came uptown, we're like, what's going on? Oh, good, a party. But do you know what I'm saying? People are coming out. They don't need festoon lighting to come here. They like coming here the way it is right now. I agree, we need to repave, we need to do the sidewalks. The sidewalks don't look good. And this is, so the conceptually, the idea is there, but I think there's just so much happening here that when it's all in, it may appear to be more than what the eye can take in a balanced sense.
And if I may, so the ABR had similar concerns in the idea that you need to be very, very careful with festoon lighting so it doesn't look like a used car lot, right? You know, that you have to be very careful. And their view was that this was, I'd say
Was this the minimum? Because
no, it's not this is the minimum. I think they had talked about, if from a price conscious standpoint, they were wondering, could you do something different in front of the Innovasi corner there? But at the end of the day, I think they were happy with this visual that it was created, because the idea, to your point, you can control the lighting and how bright it gets on a dimmer, so that would happen as part of this to create
Right.
the atmosphere without be overwhelming.
I'm
right? So-
thinking of the poles, because we also have the light poles, and one of Tesca's comments was to eliminate the banners. There is so much visually occurring in a
Yeah.
tiny space.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking of elevating this to get it to a higher level, which we want to do, and all of this beautiful landscaping and the seating, but you're adding poles where there are already light poles with banners, and then think Christmas, you have lots happening, and it will be very visually overwhelming. That's just, that's my anticipation, and that's why I suggested looking at this coming from Innovasi, going to the west. If you could create it as a fan, you reduce the number of poles, so you reduce the visual weight. At Prairie, you don't have a choice unless they don't crisscross, and you do the same thing. You do it attached to the building and then out, so you eliminate the two poles that would be right in front of Salon on the Bluff and Leggy Bird Designs, unless that's intended to show that those are the points of attachment to the building.
Jeff, do you want to talk about that, the structural issues that, and how that came up at the ABR meeting as well?
Yeah, we discussed that with Tesca, and we were looking to, save some money. We thought eliminating those two poles would eliminate some visual clutter and reduce costs. But there was a concern on Tesca's part that how you attach those light strands to the building and what kind of structural accommodations you'd have to make. How do you bolt that to a brick building with the, she mentioned a lot of wind load on these lights, and I didn't realize that ahead of time, but I guess that was kind of her thought, is that it's questionable how you would attach those to the building without, do that safely and securely. So we were all for attaching those to the building. It just might take a little engineering, a little thought to see if that's possible to do that safely.
So Jeff, does that mean that those indicate in front of Salon on the Bluff and Leggy Bird Designs that those are poles in front of the building?
Yes.
That would support?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, that is too much. And also my question was, could you even, is it allowable to attach them to a building that's on a national register? Is that a change in the facade of the building that would be allowed?
Don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, and we haven't, we've tried to encourage property owners to be part of the conversation.
Sure.
It hasn't been a very big outpouring. There's been general.
It would have been, Gary would maybe know that.
So, but the idea of, yeah, don't know the answer to that, and that was another reason, like, if you want to do this, this is why we would bid it this way, and maybe afterwards we can find out, can we do it another way for less costs and less impact?
Yeah, and for what it's worth, Prairie is lit already, so this is somewhat, I realize it's on the sidewalk, but it's somewhat redundant. If, yeah, having the poles in front of the building just seems like that's gonna, I think once we get on the other side of that, when people see that, it's gonna be incredible visual clutter. I don't think people are gonna like that at all.
So 3 items related to that. One, I think one of the ideas from the design standpoint too is having the lighting in front of the alley where Prairie is occupying that now, is that visually it's a cue to there's a crossing there, right? It alerts you, not unlike when there's a coach light next to a door or a light underneath a canopy for an opening of a entrance of something. That's a visual cue that there's something happening there. There should be, design would drive that. I think again, going back to if the board wants to do the lighting and there's ways to have that done as a bid alternate. I think there was a general idea that we didn't want to have so many bid alternates that it would push folks, we would reduce the number of bidders we have, or people would just not bid.
I have a comment on that, actually. From a strategic standpoint, we have a task of expanding our business presence in downtown, and I'm talking about Block 2, that is the post office to the end of Oak or Walnut. Walnut. And so these buildings are pretty empty, and we have festoon lightings on the south side. I think we have a unique opportunity to, and we know that we have, next to the post office, we have an empty building, or next to it. And so we have a possibility to highlight those buildings for people to provide more Lake Bluff as a destination community. We need to, I mean, right now, the south side is very entertainment rich. The north side is not very entertainment rich. And so we have a strategic possibility here to do a few touches. I mean, light is magic. I see Arlington Heights downtown, where they had a few bars, they have a lot of light, and buildings got developed next door because they had the possibility to join in the entertainment district, literally. And here, I believe we have the same possibility. We have the same possibility to attract attention and to have somebody like John DeRosier to also join there. I mean, not, maybe not John, but somebody who could actually take that space. And we have a possibility to have more entertainment in downtown Lake Bluff. And so I see that as a very convenient way to now get focused to the north side of the street.
Well, I'd just say, I was just in Hinsdale, and that to me is the gold standard of downtowns. If you want to copy somebody, copy Hinsdale. It doesn't get any classier than that. I'm just thinking this is just, for me personally, and I design people's gardens, so I have a design sense. I just think there's just too much happening here. And I can't imagine, I don't know if everybody can conceptualize what these poles look like. This is like having light poles in front of a building. Where else have you been where you would see that circumstance? I personally can't think of a single place. And I understand what President Charlot is saying, but we also have to think of the people that are here every day, not just visitors, but the residents and how they feel walking down their hometown street. And I'm looking at the pictures on page 7 and trying to imagine having 2 poles in front of, and they're not equal. The salon has an awning and Leggy Bird does not. So you have to accommodate for that coming out into the sidewalk. And let's not forget, those buildings are the anchor of the historic district. So we would be altering them visually in a way that I think is ill-advised.
You have a possibility to either have poles, from what I understand, or attaching those festoon lights to the building. Is that what we're talking about?
Or in front of Prairie, not doing lighting at all.
I guess I know at one point we talked about going across the street, and the ABR was not open to that idea of crisscrossing across the street.
That's right. They were not keen on that idea.
Did they not like the aesthetic of that? Because I feel like couldn't we tie into the regular light poles that we have? We already have electricity running to those. Couldn't we somehow tie into that? And then you highlight the north side and the south side of the street. Plus, I have to say, it's nice to me, the idea of the festoon lighting is that it's brighter down there. It can be very dark down that street and across to the green, and it's especially challenging when you have children down there and it's so dark like that. So I look at the festoon lighting 2 ways. It's fantastic for the businesses and kind of gives this feeling of kind of, you know, twinkle lights, and it looks pretty, but it also serves the purpose of providing light, which helps when you have lots of people down there riding bikes, walking across the street, what have you, that no one gets injured. But I guess I would wonder why we decided not to go across the street. Do we think that's even less aesthetically pleasing?
The ABR did. I mean, they were, again, because the scale of the buildings are different.
Okay.
And that, you know, having that would cause it visually it would amplify that, right? And they weren't looking to draw that attention to that distinction between the quality of architecture.
So we could do that as multiple phases where we keep that out right now. And when we have development occurring, we can actually add that light on our side.
Right.
I wonder if, building off what Trustee Biron mentioned, if an alternative could be proposed looking at using existing structure
Yeah.
You know, just to say, what might that look like? And it might incorporate going across the street because we're doing a different approach so that we don't have the visual clutter here. I don't know. It's just, it hasn't really been looked at that I'm aware of, and it's something that we might want to do instead of just saying, what do we want to place here? What do we want to place there? How can we build off what we already have so that we're not creating more visual clutter? And I honestly hadn't really thought about it that way, but I agree that it could be that way.
There was a thought at one point, I mean, our existing light poles just aren't tall enough to attach the lighting, and with the sag of the strands to keep a vertical clearance. I mean, there are places where they have the festoon pole and a street light incorporated into one pole. That would obviously add cost to remove all of our existing lights and redo them. One other item of note is that we are running new power to our light poles as part of this project. We've had some issues in the past, so we are running power up where that existing brick band is right now. So anything that we want to put along that line would, you know, be fairly easy to get electricity to. Tesca was not ready to commit that we could connect those light strands to the buildings. Whether, you know, there's a way to do that, I would assume there is a way. Whether it's an attractive way or not, we'd have to investigate that a little bit. And the other thing, you know, there was some talk about the mid-block crossing. You know, if the mid-block crossing goes away, then the festoon lighting in that area might, you know, that might not even be worth a discussion because that sidewalk's only 12 feet wide without the mid-block crossing.
Jeff, this is Kate. How tall are the festoon lighting poles compared to the street lamps that we currently have?
Festoon poles, I believe, are 15 or 14 feet. Our street lamps, I'm guessing, are 9. I've not measured them, but they are well above my head, but not extremely tall.
What if we just focused on the area outside of Innovasi for the festoon lighting? For right now, what if we focused on that area and said, let's figure out a way to make that look visually appealing and still put some lighting down there? We can look at other areas to put festoon lighting later. Is that financially feasible, Drew? Or would it be, I mean, clearly it would be better if we did everything while the street was all torn up, but could we start at Innovasi, and then if we decided, hey, you know what, we want to do a little bit more of this, could we manage that several years later or at a later date?
Well, it would seem like we'd want to have a master plan, how we choose to implement it, but, and so that's why if we want to have something like that really sing, we kind of need to think about it and allow for that to be a possibility as opposed to, let's just do this little thing here. And I think the idea is kind of having that broader plan in mind. Whether it gets done or not depends on so many things, like the next pandemic or whatever. But I would think we would want to at least be able to have that in mind. And again, the plan is to be so forward-thinking that we're taking advantage of having things ripped up all at once and not bringing people, you know, traipsing, you know, in and out a number of times. It is going to disturb the businesses. It is going to be, you know, in the end, it's going to be a positive, but it's a painful process to go through that. And we really want to be, again, forward-thinking and saying, let's try to get some of those things all taken care of at once so that, you know, we consolidate the costs, we have a master plan, and it looks good. And I think the thing that I thought of in terms of the visual clutter that, again, Kate brought up was, is there something that we haven't really thought of yet, like a single source of all this lighting with more of an umbrella approach? Maybe there's something that exists like that or that could be designed like that, where you have only one tether to the ground and it does something interesting. And I'm sure we could do some research on other communities and what they've done, other countries and what they've done, but there might be a creative solution that we haven't really thought of. I mean, these are great ideas, but they're obviously not the only ideas. I know we're up against a time constraint, so.
If it makes you feel any more comfortable, Tesca brought other examples, and we talked about Larimore Street and Denver and all these other, you know, locations that have lighting, you know, around the world. That, you know, these are the ideas. They've installed several in the Chicagoland area, and so it's
So that was.
It's with those in mind, you know,
Yeah,
the idea.
yeah.
So, I guess, Jeff, the idea of bidding this in a way that the village would have the flexibility on which installations they do at the time of award, is that a possibility? And also the idea of like a design build that would give the, those submitting bids the flexibility to attach it to poles or to the building if there's a way to do that? Is that something that can be done, accomplished with the bid documents?
I would bid it, I mean, if we know we want to do the 6 poles at the Innovasi corner, that's the easiest, because then we have a number in the bid per pole. We could bid the other ones as an alternate, and probably may end up paying a little extra per pole, because we'd have to put that as an alternate, but we'd also would almost have to put it in the base bid to run power to all those spots. There's a way to do it. It's just a little less efficient to keep your options open.
But I would say that to echo what Chairman Hunter has said with the ABR at not the last meeting, but the previous meeting, we should be dealing with the circumstances as we find them today. So there is, as I said, no development proposal for Block 2. So the other thing I was going to say is these light poles in front of Leggy Bird and the salon would be 15 feet. So that's in basically the window of the apartment. And my question is, if I am not in favor of putting these lights out here, but how do you think the tenant of that apartment would feel about having those lights on all night long?
I asked her that.
Or any tenant, not just the current one.
I'm just saying, but.
Any tenant. And what time would they go off out of respect for the tenants that live there? Because 10 is when the party gets started. So what are we?
Properly agree.
Yeah.
This is absolutely a great point, and we should follow up on that.
It really is true. I mean, we talk a lot about respect here. We need to remember people live up here, and they have always. And so I find that probably really the best reason not to do this. I think that Trustee Marquis is right. The Innovasi plan seems amenable. We could call it a day, and I think when we get on the other side of it, we'd be like, yep, that was good, that's enough. That's open and welcoming and inviting, and then we're having our cake and eating it too.
If I could speak for a moment on that, as I've listened to everyone's points, when I think of the cost and what we are trying to accomplish with the parking, which I do think the merchants there would be unhappy to lose the parking, even though they would be no doubt happy to have the pedestrian feel. I do think the parking would be difficult for folks to lose, for the merchants there. It seems like a total win to do the corner by Innovasi. It seems like misused space now that we could just make that into a magical little corner. And it just so happens to be outside of Innovasi, but that could be a public space primarily. When people go over to B Market and grab something to drink and sit somewhere, they might want to sit there, for example. So the solution that makes the most sense to me is to focus on the Center Avenue Innovasi corner. So that whole line along Twigs to Innovasi, get those trees in the grass, mud, in a better condition along there. Wire for the Innovasi corner as a public space that's going to be awesome. And I think preserve the parking down the street.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I am right now, rather than do the bump outs down the street.
I concur with Susan.
Drew, have you had any feedback from merchants? I know we've heard from Floatstone about parking. Have you had any other comments?
Not specifically, unfortunately. I mean, there just really hasn't been a lot of participation. I mean, despite the prods, there hasn't. I mean, I think the general idea, I mean, again, and I've said this to all of you, I know that the village's most recent parking study identifies us in a situation where, Jeff, do you want to describe how the parking consultant describes our current parking situation?
Well, they say we have a surplus of parking, just not necessarily in the most convenient place for people. You know, Block 2 is considered underparked. Block 1 is overparked. Center Avenue, I think, had a surplus, but this was probably the most underparked block in the study.
Underparked meaning
Meaning
not enough
a deficit.
Adequate stalls for the current uses.
Yeah, well, that's what strikes me about this.
And Jeff, you did say that if the mid-block crossing is not done as shown in this current plan that everybody's looking at, you would only end up losing one stall?
Yes, you would lose one stall to expand the bump out in front of the community church, and that would be the only stall lost.
That makes more sense to me. Even losing the bump out by the community church makes some amount of sense, but I think that corner right by the library could be a nice corner as well. It's the bump out in the middle of the block that I just can't get my head around it making sense.
I think we should explore splitting the baby here and consider keeping the lighting and the bump out over by the community church, because that way we're kind of mirroring. It's a balance. There's an aesthetic, but also what Trustee Markey said is spot on. It's very dark. I know I've spent many evenings walking back from the brewery towards a parking spot. Yes, that's right, to study. And it is dark, and cars do drive fast on Scranton. And frankly, I kind of was turned off by the bump out until, Jeff, you mentioned that the impact would be to slow down. I think I've seen kids darting out on their bikes, cars driving quickly. It's a very populated space. So if we're looking for balance, though, we're bringing more light at each end. And that also, it doesn't have to be associated with an existing business. It's expanding the gathering spaces. So we have a lot of food options where you can take out. You know, a group can take their sandwiches or their bowls or burritos or their food from B Market and go sit down at the opposite end, where right now, sometimes on a crowded night, there's no seating. And you know, you're kind of wandering around or sitting on the green. So,
Trustee Fisher, doing that as well, you would add another tree. You can put a tree back into that space.
there you go.
So could we compromise on that? Could we say, let's do the two corners?
Yeah.
And get rid of the bump out, and then we can keep the majority of the parking, but we're still adding some aesthetic to the street? How do people feel about that?
Is there a way, Jeff or Drew, to do some landscaping here in front of Prairie, because that has become a hotspot gathering? I like the idea of these benches and greenery without the bump out. Is there some option there?
You could put another tree in line with the others, but you know, they kind of that cut out in the sidewalk, that the trees are mulched, that's kind of the space you have to work with.
Are we talking about doing grates with those trees that are even, no grates?
No, because you would end up having to destroy the trees to install the grates properly.
Okay, so it won't be level?
It'll be like it is today.
Okay.
So how should we achieve consensus from this point on? We have a couple opinions on the days. That is a design that is what we have with maybe less lights, but basically a balanced design from start of street to end of street, or maybe maximizing our parking lots and having less lights for residents over Leggy Bird, for example, and I respect that. I would not want that all night long. How should we achieve consensus? How should we achieve consensus on the different features here?
Could I add just one comment? I'm sorry. I just wanted to add one comment. At a PCCBA meeting, and Susan, you may recall this, when Gary Lawrence's project was under consideration, the owner of Bluffington's got up and spoke for 10 minutes about parking, and we can't afford to lose those spaces. He said his customers will go around the block twice and then they leave. So I see your point, and I also take Joy's point, but really it's a trade-off, and we have to accept the reality that there might be another way to put maybe a street lamp there or some other kind of lighting, because I don't disagree, it is dark. But if we start losing parking spaces, the businesses will suffer. And I would say Bluffington's, I'm looking now and I can't find it quickly, but there is on the record at that meeting substantial testimony about that. And I think we need to respect that, because we have to remember a lot of the people that are the customers during the day are older and they drive. And we just need to think about them too when we're making these choices. So I would go back to eliminating the festoon lighting there, and anything that would reduce the parking substantially.
So how do we achieve consensus? We have different features. We want to maximize parking space, or we want to maximize design, or we want to add lighting, so we want to keep lighting low, not to disturb people. How do we go from this point on?
Well, somebody can make a motion, and you can do a straw poll, but I mean, that's probably the cleanest. I think I'm hearing consensus
I think so.
around the splitting of the baby concept. Then it comes down to, how do you want to do the barbell on the east side? What do you want to do with that? And so I think you could probably, somebody can make a motion in that regard. Although before that happens, there are people on this call still that maybe want to have comments on this. I don't know if you want to.
That would be great.
Yeah. So is there anybody who is on this call that may have comments on this particular item under the village administrator's report regarding the Scranton Avenue streetscapes? Are there anyone there? Please raise your hand if you wish to speak to this item. Maybe there's not.
Okay.
Oh, there is. Okay. Spoke too soon. All right. So, yeah. Mrs. Collins.
Hi, Drew.
Hey.
You knew I wouldn't hold myself back. I'm sorry. I truly did not intend to speak here, but there's one thing that Rob Douglas raised this in the previous ABR meeting, and it's a really good point. Block 1 is our party block, and that, when I heard about this idea of lighting, I assumed that there would be, a real emphasis on that block, getting a lot of the festoon lighting there. And it seems but the two blocks are very different. So it seems to me that there does need to be a conceptual design that somehow ties the two blocks together and carries the party atmosphere to the west as well, even if it's done phased, even if block 1 is done later. So I think, number one, there should be a concept plan for all the lighting, and it ties it together. And then second, I think Kate or Trustee Briand raised some good points about, how are these poles hitting buildings and how high are they going with respect to windows and things. I don't think we have a complete design if we just look in plan. I think we need elevations and perspectives to really know what you're getting, because just seeing it in plan makes it very, very hard to visualize. And that's it. Those are my comments.
Jeff, could you share that elevation drawing? I think it's shown as drawing 3.
Thank you, Mrs. Collins.
Yeah. So I know Tesca landscape architect and architect Jody Mariano, when she came up with this concept and worked with the ABR to create this, that they were out there taking measurements to be sure, like even that they were going to be out of the tree branches. They were trying to come up with that. And this is probably the closest thing that we have in terms of a perspective. Probably, I think everybody knows Mrs. Collins is an architect, the idea. So I don't know if this is what you had in mind, Mickey, in terms of a visual aid to demonstrate how this would look in reality, but this is a combination of I would say a cartoon type drawing overlaid with the actual visual image of the central business district to scale.
I'm having trouble seeing its relationship to the existing light poles, for instance, and their heights.
I see. I know there's some on the north side of the street.
Yeah, you can see it there.
I don't think there's one on the south side that's immediately visible.
There is a.
It looks like these poles are maybe not as high as Jeff said they would be, the ones that are shown here.
In height.
In height.
They look similar in height.
I'm looking at the human scale, and I'm assuming that individual is like 5'10" or something, so it to be at least, 15 feet in height or so.
To me, this drawing, when I look at it, makes it look like our existing poles are taller than perhaps I thought,
Yeah.
if these are in fact to scale. But I think the festoons are still that 14 to 15 feet.
Yeah. Okay.
But it would be helpful to have what Mickey's suggesting with elevations facing south, so you can see, so people can have a better visual of what the festoon light poles would look like if they were smack in the front of the building, in front of Leggy Bird and the salon. Because with this perspective facing east, you can't do that. So she's right. I understand it's an added cost, but this is permanent. So before we haul off and do this, I think we'd want to know what we're going to be looking at. I also agree with the whole idea of Block 1. And my guess is it would be a lot easier to attach to a newer structure where the brick and mortar is not as fragile as a building that was built 100 years ago. So if we were to crisscross the street, it would be there. If that was something, I was always curious about how the fire department weighed in on that, is the height of the, to make sure like a hook and ladder can get under there. Is that a consideration?
It would be in the
Okay,
garbage
I was just
trucks, right, the
curious.
idea, yeah. And
Or to respond,
but-
that's our only 3-story building, so if those are crisscrossing, to respond to anything happening on the 3rd floor, if those are an impediment to doing that. If they're, depending on how they're strung across the street. That is, at present, our only 3rd-story building, and I'm just curious how other municipalities, the fire department would have to address that.
Yeah, I mean, there's the conversations held from the ABR where they weren't keen on having anything crisscross the street,
Right,
but also
understood.
the idea that they would design it at a height that would be adequate to meet those concerns. And the truth of the matter is, I think we talked about that the lights, the spits are the poles.
Yes.
The lights are not too far off what you'd buy at Costco. I mean, honestly, so the idea, if a ladder truck had to bust through them, so be it, right? That's just the reality, that's what would
Right.
happen. So Jeff, in terms of timing, if the board meets in approximately 2 weeks, the idea of getting a little more clarity around this, is that hamstring the bidding process for you to get this project done in the fall? And if so, then please advise. And if not, please advise as well, so that maybe we can go to it seems to be some general consensus around what this would final visually, in terms of the layout from a bird's eye look like, but maybe there'd be another perspective provided that may give greater comfort to this body before pulling the trigger.
If we have a consensus on at least most of the plan and a budget, then we can go ahead with final design of the things that we all know are going to be in the plan, and maybe just sketch up some more options for the things that people want to see again. And that way we can still keep moving towards bid. And then maybe bring it back in 2 weeks and get some final decisions about what should go out for bid. And yeah, we do run into an issue. We would like to award a project and have it bid out by the end of June or the first meeting in July for September, October construction. We don't want to push too late into the year for asphalt into November and then have weather issues, and then we don't have a finished product, and we got to come back in the spring and disturb everybody again. So that's the fear. Compacting, we can set the schedule whatever we want in the bid documents. It's just if we compact them too much, we will lose some bidding interest for people who have other projects. So we like to provide some flexibility in schedule and give them a large of a window as we possibly can to hopefully get better pricing.
Okay, that's great. So I think, again, if there's it sounds like, and you got, everybody sitting here could tell me differently, but I think the consensus is to do the ends, to not have the mid-block crossing, to not have the festoon lightings and the mid-block crossing.
Right.
And proceed with that plan, and then we can come back and ask Tesca to do some perspectives on what that may look like, looking south and looking east and west, perhaps, see what that, how many, we can try to be reasonable in the cost of that, so that everybody can have an understanding of how this relates to the existing streetscape and architecture. Does that sound like a go?
I like it.
That makes sense to me.
Great.
Yes.
Thank you.
All
I'd
right.
like to make a motion in that general vein, as you just described so fully.
Okay.
And I'll second that.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
We need a roll call.
Okay, so if there's any final questions or
Any final questions, please?
is there final comments from the public as well?
Okay, so are there any final comments, any questions, comments on these boards? And what about the public? Any comment from the public?
Mrs. Collins or any others, any final comments before the board calls a vote on this particular item where we are seeking direction?
Well, let me just ask if anybody feels we should have a unified concept for our downtown that includes Block 1, even though it wouldn't be part of this project, but wouldn't you want, if there's a pole design, shouldn't it work for both conditions, for instance? Maybe that influences what happens there at the corner by Innovasi, because you want something carrying over to the other diagonally across the street, for instance, or, shouldn't that be the best way to approach this?
I absolutely, yeah.
Is there a motion I hear you very well, and I think this is a great idea to have a unified lighting plan in between Block 1 and Block 2. That's what we're talking about.
For the entire CBD.
Yeah.
Okay, so for the entire CBD, do I have a motion to basically create that plan?
Okay, so wait a minute. Did we have a?
We
vote
didn't have
on
a
the other
vote yet.
motion?
We can amend the current motion.
We
Or
amended.
do you just want to withdraw the current motion and do this? I
I
just
think
want
we
to make
should
sure that.
amend to a current motion and to create, as part of a current motion, to also add a unified plan on the CBD, including
Block 1.
Block 1.
And the train station, right? And so the entire CBD. So just for clarity's sake, though, the timing of that would, if done, that getting that plan done would preclude this moving forward in the fall, most likely.
I think,
Can we do two motions? Can we do two separate motions, so they're two separate things, so this can move forward, and then we can move forward on the lighting plan separately?
Yeah, is
Yes.
the one motion that's been made and seconded one of those motions?
yes.
Yes,
Let's take a vote on that.
Let's do that one
Yes.
first.
Yeah.
Vote on the motion that you made.
Yes, so we are going to vote on the first motion that is,
Made by trustee Ankerman, seconded by trustee
yes.
Marquis.
So clerk, please call the roll.
Now she's,
Now she's frozen, yes?
time. There.
There we go.
You're back.
Hello? Oh, God. Sorry. Trustee Inkerman,
Aye.
Trustee Brienne,
Aye.
Trustee Fisher,
Aye.
Trustee Marquis,
Aye.
Trustee Rappin,
Aye.
Trustee Ryder.
Aye.
Motion passes.
So now, should I entertain a motion for a global plan of lighting between, for the CBD, including the train station and Block 1?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you.
And for clarity's sake, the central business district to include Block 3, right? So it's the entire central business district. So this is including that, and It may look differently because of that, but the idea in terms of the footprint from the train station to Evanston.
Okay. Clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Markey,
Aye.
Trustee Ryder,
Aye.
Trustee Rappin,
Aye.
Trustee Inkman,
Aye.
Trustee Briand,
Aye.
Trustee Fisher.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you.
So I have a proposal from Tesca to do that plan. It's been a while since, it's been probably about 2 weeks since I've looked at it. I don't want to misquote the price that's with that, but if I need to bring it, that'll bring that to the next meeting as well.
Okay, perfect.
And could you just, for my sake, reiterate the previous motion so that just so everybody that's listening is clear on what exactly we just voted on this proposal? So lighting at Innovasi, et cetera, et cetera. Not the
so-
unified plan, the prior
Can you show it on the visual too? I can do that. Jeff, could you bring up the drawing number 2, please? So it would be everything shown on this drawing with the exception of the mid-block crossing and the lighting at the mid-block crossing.
What about the lighting over by Bluff?
Right.
That was included, as I understood it.
Oh,
Yes. That's what, is that what?
okay.
That
I
was
guess
my-
I
that was
should have
my
asked that
understanding that we were-
clarifying question before because I just voted for something that I'm not in favor of. So I guess that was my first mistake. That's unfortunate.
By getting the bid,
We're getting a bid, we're not necessarily.
I understand that,
We can
but
always,
I'm sorry I didn't ask that question
Well, anyway, and
before.
Jeff, in terms of preparing the bid documents, that actually, the final bid for that, we won't actually have that ready within 2 weeks anyway, right? The bid package?
Totally different lighting designs. It's not like there's symmetry.
I know.
Jeff?
Yes, sorry, it just blanked out on me for a bit again, but I would say you're going to see this again if you don't want the lighting on the far east end. You know, we can have it as an alternate. You'll see this again before it goes out to bids. We'll just work on it as if it's there,
Yeah.
and then we can always take it out.
Yeah.
Okay.
We can get a bid on it and see how it goes.
So,
I'm going to try and insert that at every meeting.
Trustee Briand, I don't know if you heard Village Engineer Hanson, but he stated basically, you'll get another look at this.
Yes,
So,
I did.
But for right now, we'll proceed in that manner and
That's
we'll
fine.
get
Yeah.
another
that's
bite
fine.
at the
No,
apple,
and
so to
then,
speak.
and then Attorney Friedman just clarified something for me, so that's fine.
Okay.
That's fine. I need to put on both of my listening ears.
That's right, in stereo.
And we'll have a possibility to amend that later on. or to
Right,
remove items.
exactly.
Drew,
So,
this is a lot of value for the owners of the properties. It really would be great if they engaged in this process.
I will poke them again and ask them, yes, agreed. And so between now and then, I will try that again and let them know this is where it currently stands. And I will do that. And thus concludes my report.
more research for you.
Quick report.
Next,
Thought it was so quick.
next we have our village attorney's report. Mr. Friedman.
No report tonight.
Thank you. Our next item on the agenda is item 16. That is a resolution approving the temporary increase in the number of authorized positions for police officers. On April 26, 2021, the Village Board of Trustees approved the village official pay plan, which included the authorized salary ranges and number of regular full-time positions for the fiscal year 2021-2022 period. More specific to law enforcement personnel, this pay plan authorized 10 patrol officers and 3 police sergeants. With the news that one of the village officers was to retire in early July, the village board approved on May 10, 2021, a temporary increase in the number of police officers, raised from 10 to 11, in order to immediately begin training of a lateral hire and minimize overtime spending. Police Chief Hoskin was notified this week that another village long tenure patrol officer will retire effective July 1st, 2021, creating an additional vacancy on one of the patrol shifts. Fortunately, the police department has been in communication with a lateral transfer candidate who is currently employed, highly qualified, Illinois certified peace officer. In order to most efficiently achieve full staffing, the village administrator and chief of police recommend that the village board again authorize a temporary increase in the number of police officers by one, raised from 11 to 12, for a period not to go beyond July 9, 2021. Is there a motion to approve this resolution?
So moved?
Second.
Thank you.
Trustee Fisher,
Aye.
Trustee Marquis,
Aye.
Trustee Rappin,
Aye.
Trustee Ryder,
Aye.
Trustee Inkeman,
Aye.
Trustee Brian.
Aye.
I think we skipped 10A, the declaration, the emergency declaration.
We did.
You haven't gone back to it.
We can go back to it?
Sure.
Okay.
I thought you were planning to go back to it.
I was planning to go back to it.
Sorry.
Oh, no.
Next on our agenda is item 10A, a consideration of an extension of a village president's declaration of civil emergency. On March 18, 2020, President O'Hara issued declaration of emergency for the village of Lake Bluff declaration related to the COVID-19 emergency. The declaration, among other things, provided that physical fitness facilities and membership sport and recreational clubs must close. 2, that the village may enter into contracts for the emergency purchase of goods and services. 3, the village administrator may implement emergency staffing protocols pursuant to the village respective collective bargaining agreements. And 4, directed village officials and employees to cooperate with other government agencies. Subsequently, the village president issued an April 23rd supplemental order requiring the use of face coverings in the village. A similar requirement was imposed statewide on May 1st by order of the governor. The village president has the authority to issue the declaration and any supplemental orders pursuant to the enabling provisions set forth in the Lake Bluff Municipal Code. In accordance with Illinois statutes, the village president's declaration lasted only for a period of 7 days, unless it was extended by action of the village board. Since its March 18, 2020 meeting, and most recently at its May 10, 2021 meeting, the village board has extended the declaration until its next regular meeting. Because the village board will meet on Monday, the declaration will expire at the end of that board meeting unless the board extends the duration of the declaration. The agenda for the board meeting has been prepared in a manner to allow the board, if so it desires, to extend the term of the declaration. The extension can be accomplished by a motion, a second, and a roll call vote. No written ordinance or resolution is necessary. If a village board desires to extend the declaration, the motion needs to include an expiration date. And we recommend that the motion provides. I hereby move to extend the village president's on March 18, 2020 declaration of emergency until the end of the next regular, special, or emergency meeting of the village board.
Correct. It's actually,
Yeah, so you're looking for somebody to make that motion.
Correct. Anybody wishing to make a motion?
I'll do it. You want me to read this?
No,
No, we're good?
you're going to say so moved.
So moved.
Second.
Can I ask you a question now that we've done the motion? So at what point in time would it be no longer necessary? Because we're not meeting remotely.
Right.
The purchases that have been done in terms of, meeting COVID special needs have been done. It's largely complete. I mean, it's not that I have an agenda other than to just thoughtfully say, when would this end? Because it almost seems like we're there. So, Peter?
So a couple things, just to distinguish. So there's the remote meetings, which we're still operating under, and then there's the emergency declaration. So the remote meetings, so long as the governor's emergency disaster declaration remains in place, then the village president's statement at the last meeting that in-person meetings are still impractical, then we can continue to operate in a way that allows a virtual meeting where a majority of a quorum is not physically present. That can end whenever we want it to end. Whenever we want to say we're done with virtual meetings, we want everybody to be here, and we're operating under the typical Open Meetings Act requirements, we can do that whenever we want, and the village president has it within his authority outside of this emergency declaration.
I was going to say, because
Separate issue.
we could decide, oh, wow, we're having this, fourth wave, whatever it is, and we really don't want to.
Right, but as long as the governor's disaster declaration remains in place, which it does, and which it's going to even when we go to phase 5, he's going to wait a
Okay.
little while, maybe, to protect against something
Right.
unexpected happening.
To be agile.
But if the village president said, I think regardless of the fact that the disaster declaration is still in place, I think we can begin to meet normally again, then he can do that. And then if something happens and there's still the governor's disaster declaration that's out there, he can then make a finding again to bring us all back to virtual meetings.
So should someone
So-
choose to not, though, be in person for whatever reason, no action on the board needs to take place to permit that, if we say we're not going to extend this?
No, so there's, just separate the separate what's being on the table right now, because that does not relate to remote meetings.
Okay.
Remote meetings solely relates to the village president's finding at the last meeting, which he read, which said, because of the disaster declaration, because of the pandemic, I think that it's impractical to hold normal in-person meetings. That can be done away with at any time. If he did do that, then we would come back and the normal Open Meetings Act requirements, which require a quorum to be physically present, and remote participation only in the case of a family emergency, business, or health reasons. So just not wanting to come because of COVID unless it's a unless it's some specific health reason, that only those 3 would justify it. Whereas now, we don't need that justification. Anybody who wants to participate remotely can do it. This emergency declaration that you're considering, again, it's entirely up to the village board. The village board gives the village president the authority to have this emergency declaration. The village board can get rid of the emergency declaration whenever it wants to. Even that won't affect the remote meetings. But the emergency declaration, it's a question, Drew, for you and the administration. It allows for, the things that I think you've used are intergovernmental cooperation and staffing issues. I think those are the two.
Well, and the changing the rules. I mean, we've been responding to the ever-changing environment with respect
Right.
to what benefits are applied in relationship to employees who may be out on COVID leave and so forth, and which is evolving constantly. But that's been in place as well.
So it may make sense. What some have done, other communities have done, when everybody's starting to ask the exact question you're asking, is for the administration to go back and look and report back. I'm not trying to give you work, but this is just what other people have been doing. To go back and look and report back to the board at the next meeting, saying here's what we think we need, or here's what we don't think we need, and then given the situation, because by the next village, we're getting to the point, we're gonna go to phase 5 here in a month or so.
Yeah.
11th or June 11th.
June 11th, right. So that may change the dynamic too, and maybe the governor won't reissue his disaster declaration, which will change everything.
Yeah.
So,
And from our perspective, what you see here, is clunky as this has been tonight. It's the first time, of course, that it's been this bad. But the idea that, staff, like, Jeff being up in Wisconsin or Bettina being home to do this, but their presence is not required under the law, right? They can continue to participate in this manner. So we want to continue using this format because I've heard from residents, they love to have this flexibility to sit at home, and whether that be in Lake Bluff or if there's summer home somewhere else or winter home, and participate in the public process. And that's a big part of the feedback that we've received the village has received over the years with the various strategic planning processes has been, tell us how to participate, give us paths or avenues to do so. So I think having this hybrid session is something that the village should consider. I mean, keeping our license or, with Zoom still active, keep offering this. I mean, again, it was clunky tonight. I'm not sure why we're having these network connections, but generally I think it works. I mean, I think it's flown fairly well. That's from a basic level, what I think we would need or would want to have to continue, but largely, I mean, we're going back to business as normal. I mean, Village, I mean, for some of you may or may not know, I mean, Village Hall, we opened up pretty quickly after all this happened, and we were opened up, I think at the end of June. I mean, there's some city halls that still haven't opened.
Right.
And so, we've been open for a long time, and now we're doing our current policies are in transition where it's, honor code, residents coming in to Village Hall, it's, hey, if you've been vaccinated, you don't need to wear a mask. If you have, please mask up. So, I mean, we're following the CDC guidance, and it's been working here, across the street at the Public Safety Building, down the road at Public Works, and in our interactions with the public. So it's, I mean, all these, and the truth of the matter, those other things we talked about, any other changes that we've had to do in terms of staffing, I mean, you're right, those things, PPE needs, all that, we're done dealing with those issues, hopefully, right? It certainly appears so, but those needs have passed.
Thank you.
That's a good question.
Could I ask Peter one more follow-up question to what Trustee Ankman asked is, how does changing the remote meetings provision change the public participation in the room? Because I mentioned to Drew in one of our phone calls that there was a recent school board meeting where the board members were here, but a lot of members of the public were here as well in the room. So at present, prior to these meetings, they've been virtual, and all participation has been virtual as well. But what, if any, impact does that have?
For like a public hearing testimony?
Right, so for
Yeah,
example,
or just
just
Public comment?
public comment, just normally people are here, the room isn't always full, but on certain issues, it would be. So if we continue to extend this, and then we have something where we know there would be a lot of public comment, we're sitting here, but no one in the public from the public is here.
So as long as public comment can be, let's say 6 months from now, you're meeting normally, but you still, as Drew said, want to provide this
Right.
system. As long as you all and anybody who's attending the meeting, whether virtually or in person, can hear all of the comments, then that's perfectly allowed under the Open Meetings Act. You just have to make sure that nobody's cut out from any part of the meeting.
I like the idea of keeping Zoom going. I really do. I think that engages so many more people because they might not be here in Lake Bluff, but they might want to comment. And I think if we have the technology, oh God, now I'm going to quote William Shatner or something, but
You just turned 90.
I can't get away from
Just turned
quoting.
90.
Yeah, sorry.
90.
I know.
It's getting late.
But
I mean, I'll just
yeah.
add that it's
getting
not
loopy.
just here, across the board in many industries, we're realizing the efficiency of virtual meetings and virtual appearances. The court system probably will continue offering Zoom, at least in my division. And I think it's a brilliant idea if we need a motion on it eventually.
So should we consider a motion right now to keep that form of communication?
I think it's premature. I think we can wait because it's in place.
It's not on the agenda either.
Yeah.
Details.
Things like that.
Hey, I just wanted to mention too, I think there were a couple of things that we passed during COVID that were sunsetting when we get rid of the emergency declaration. I feel like there was something we passed under the nuisance, I can't quite remember right now, but it had to do with gathering in private spaces. It was, it had to do, yeah, and I'll remind you, Drew, but I just want to make sure we go back and we look at a few of those things that we passed during the emergency timeframe that we said would sunset when we got rid of the declaration.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, and a lot of those things have, I mean, this declaration that President Charlot signed when he came into office is the bare bones of that. I mean, the previous one had, I mean, if you remember the first one, it had certain types of businesses that were physical fitness centers before the governor's, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was in there.
And the bare bones one is the one that is being extended tonight. If
That is
so-
correct,
right,
yeah.
So
So there is no current local mask mandate, right? They're following CDC guidance. The village did have its own mask mandate in there, but that's gone.
Yeah.
So the one that's in front of you now is just kind of like the bare bones.
Yeah, I think there were.
I think I know what you're referring to, but it's not coming back.
I know,
what you're talking about.
I can't, it was a while ago that we passed
Yeah.
it, but I remember we
Yeah.
passed it with the sunset clause.
Yep.
So we have a first motion and a second motion. Roll call. Clerk, please call the roll.
This is on the extending of the presidential declaration.
Correct, till the next meeting.
Correct.
Clerk Hatch?
Okay.
Yes.
Yes. Sorry, I was frozen again. Trustee Inkerman,
Aye.
Trustee Brian,
Aye.
Trustee Fisher,
Aye.
Trustee Markey,
Aye.
Trustee Rappin,
Aye.
Trustee Ryder.
Aye.
Motion passes.
We're now at item 17, an ordinance amending the intergovernmental agreements establishing the Solid Waste Agency of Lake County, Illinois, SWALCO. The village is a member of the Solid Waste Agency of Lake County, SWALCO, and has been since its formation circa 1991. Pursuant to the SWALCO intergovernmental agreement, each member designates, by resolution, one director and one alternate director to exercise the members' voting power at meetings of its board of directors. Only current elected officials, city managers, or designated senior staff may serve on the SWALCO board of directors or alternate directors. For Lake Bluff, village administrator Drew Irvin serves as the director, and village engineer Jeff Hansen serves as the alternate director. At the April 15, 2021 SWALCO Board of Director meeting, the SWALCO Board recommended an amendment to the intergovernmental agreement. The amendment would allow an immediate past mayor whose term of office ended to serve as an alternate director on the SWALCO Board of Directors. In order for this amendment to take effect, every SWALCO member community must approve a proposed amendment by ordinance. The attached ordinance, if approved, will provide Lake Bluff approval of the amendment. Are there any questions, discussions, or concerns?
Do we need to have a motion before we discuss?
Yes.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Any questions? Hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
This is first reading.
She's muted.
You're muted.
Trustee Brian,
Aye.
Trustee Fisher,
Aye.
Trustee Markey,
Aye.
Trustee Ryder,
Aye.
Trustee Rappin,
Aye.
Trustee Inkerman.
Aye.
So, so that motion carries. So historically, for things, when there's ordinances that are of not great consequence, the village board has at times waived second reading, because usually the purpose of the first and second reading is to give ample notice to the general public that the village is taking an action and changing something that's significant enough to require an ordinance. Amending this IGA, while that's an important document,
Right.
this is not something that I would equate the rising to the level that was going to give heartburn to anybody if the board would attempt to waive that ordinance, because I don't think anybody's, worried about who, and it's really not even impacting this village per se at this moment, but if there's another community that wishes to appoint a former elected official to serve at the post
Right.
at SWALCO. So what can be made is a motion to waive that second reading requirement, and the board can pass this ordinance in one
Right.
evening, and we can deliver this to SWALCO.
I would like to make a motion to waive second reading.
Second.
Questions or comments? Yeah.
Any questions, comments?
And just FYI, this requires a supermajority vote.
So clerk, call the roll again, please.
Trustee Rappin,
Aye.
Trustee Ryder,
Aye.
Trustee Inkerman,
Aye.
Trustee Brian,
Aye.
Trustee Fisher,
Aye.
Trustee Markey.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Next is item 18, a public hearing to consider awarding a franchise for the collection of waste from non-residential locations and any proposed franchise fees. As directed by the village board in November and consistent with state law, staff is concluding a competitive request for proposals process to award the village exclusive residential and commercial solid waste hauling franchises to a private firm. State statute requires that in order to award the village first commercial franchise, after issuing a request for proposal, the municipality may not award a franchise without first, one, allowing at least 30 days for proposals to be submitted to the municipality. Number two, holding at least one public hearing after the receipt of proposals on whether to award a franchise to a proposed franchisee. And three, providing at least 30 days public notice of the hearing. At the public hearing, the municipality must disclose and discuss the proposed franchise fee or calculation formula of such franchise fee that it will receive under the proposed franchise. Accordingly, staff provided 30 days advance notice of a public hearing scheduled for Monday, March 22nd at 7 p.m. to satisfy requirements 2 and 3 listed above. Since its March 22nd, 2021 meeting and most recently at its May 10, 2021 meeting, the village board has continued the public hearing. The village evaluation subcommittee and staff continues to negotiate with proposers and accordingly are not yet ready to recommend award of a commercial franchise. Accordingly, staff recommends the village resumes the public hearing, accept any comment, and continue the hearing to the village board's next meeting on Monday, June 14th, 2021 at 7 p.m. Is there a motion to continue the public hearing?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
Just to clarify, I mean, is this basically our waste collection contract is up and now we're looking to renew it and you guys are going to recommend?
Yes, plus the village has gone through a 3-year study to create its own commercial franchise, so that we have a franchise for residential. Now we'll be having a franchise, so having one hauler provide for both potentially.
Okay.
But that the idea that the goal is to try to save our businesses money and at the same time expand recycling and food scrapping amongst our commercial users as well. So the village is talking with the various proposers towards that end, and we have received bids already, and we're working as a small subgroup of the village, including Trustee Anchorman and another former trustee that had involved with the village in the past on this, Brian Renner. Some of you may recall Brian. But we've been working towards that end and making progress. I think what has been found historically when when municipalities have done commercial franchises, that they have in fact saved people money, and I say people saving commercial and our merchants money, and in fact grown recycling. So I mean, those are the village's objectives as we entered into this, and past history has shown that will certainly happen for our merchants. So I think this is an exciting opportunity for the village as we get closer to that. I suspect you'll probably have 2 more continuances if I had to guess, but we're getting closer. So
Does commercial, does that basically mean award commercial franchise? What does that mean?
Yeah, so the village would say there's one hauler who should be picking up commercial properties in the village and only one hauler. There are some exceptions the village could carve out. Let's say if there was Target had some national contract that you can carve out people, but typically they want to join in, and that also includes like the other public institutions like the school district and the park district can jump on board with that too if they think they can save money.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Hearing none, clerk, please call the roll. Thank you.
Trustee Ryder,
Aye.
Trustee Inkman,
Aye.
Trustee Brienne,
Aye.
Trustee Fisher,
Aye.
Trustee Markey,
Aye.
Trustee Rappin.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Next is our trustee report. Do we have any report this evening? So might I get a motion to go into a closed session to discuss actual litigation
And one more, land disposition.
and the land disposition?
So
So
moved.
Second,
Second.
thank you.
So you had first. Roll call.
Clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Inkeman,
Aye.
Trustee Brienne,
Aye.
Trustee Fisher,
Aye.
Trustee Markey,
Aye.
Trustee Rappin,
Aye.
Trustee Ryder.
Aye.
Thank you.
Motion passes.
Thank you. This concludes the open part of a village board meeting. Thank you to anyone in attendance and have a great evening.
Yeah. So everybody who is village clerk Catherine Hatch, you should have received a notice for a closed session meeting to join in on. So you'll exit this meeting and join in on the other meeting. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Matt.